Chapter 4809. Let's send her on her way. It's best if her soul scatters and dissipates between heaven and earth. She will never enter the cycle of reincarnation. One of the great emperors narrowed his eyes and said. A ruthless glint flashed across his eyes. All right. The four of us will join forces and give her a fatal blow. As the other three spoke, they looked at each other and revealed a grim smile. Just as the four great emperors were preparing for the final blow, on Cloud Sky Mountain, the three children saw their mother vomiting blood and her face turning pale. They couldn't help but become anxious. What should we do? Mother vomited blood. Will she be all right? Yu's eyes were red from worry. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she forced them back down. Mother will be fine. She will definitely be fine. Mu Chen said firmly. His little face was tense as he looked nervously at the scene in front of him. Mother. Hao called out softly. His voice was choked with sobs and his heart was thumping wildly. No one knew that his body was trembling because of fear and worry. At the peak of Cloud Sky Mountain, Emperor Qing was also paying attention to Fengzhou's situation below. When he saw her vomiting blood, he frowned slightly. However, he still closed his eyes and sat there quietly. Perhaps, in his opinion, since Fengzhou could withstand the first 3 bolts of heavenly thunder, she should also be able to withstand the last 3 bolts of heavenly thunder. What's more, she herself was an alchemist, so perhaps she had refined some kind of divine pill in reserve. It was impossible for her to vomit blood just because of these 2 bolts of heavenly thunder. However, judging from the current situation, it would appear that he was indeed injured. If he was injured, the situation would become very dangerous in the final bolt of heavenly lightning. At the same time, at the Spirit Sea realm, Guan Xilin and the others were also shocked and they saw Fengzhou vomit blood. She vomited blood. What should we do? There's still the last bolt of lightning. Will she be able to withstand it? Guan Xilin said anxiously. Wanyan Qianhua looked at Fengzhou in front of him and took a deep breath. He looked at Jun Juesheng beside him and asked, What do you think? Jun Juesheng pursed his lips and looked at Fengzhou in front of him with a grave expression. He said, I'm afraid that her heart and 5 internal organs will be injured. If that happens, I'm afraid that she won't be able to withstand the last bolt of lightning. Based on her situation, the consequence of failure is very likely. Hearing this, Wanyan Qianhua immediately said, Let's find a way to save her. We can't just watch her die in front of us. As soon as she finished speaking, she wanted to take a step forward. Wait. Du Fan and Leng Hua spoke at the same time. They walked over and looked at Wanyan Qianhua and the others. They said, Master told us not to disturb her when she's breaking through. We can only observe and not get close. It's useless no matter who gets close to her. Not only can we not save her, but it's also very likely that we'll be accidentally injured by the lightning. Wanyan Qianhua's face darkened when he heard this. He said, But she's vomiting blood now. Do you know what will happen if she fails? Du Fan and Leng Hua looked at each other and nodded. They said, Of course we know. However, we're here to protect her under Master's orders. Moreover, we believe in Master. Chapter 48:10. Seeing this, Jun Juesheng held Wanyan Qianhua's hand and said, Believe in Fengzhou. She never does anything she's not sure of. Besides, Du Fan and the others are right. She has withstood so many bolts of lightning, so there's no reason for her not to be able to withstand the last one. Believe in her. Hearing this, Wanyan Qianhua nodded and didn't say anything else. She just leaned into Jun Juesheng's arms and didn't dare to look at the scene where the last bolt of lightning was about to strike. Hearing this, Guan Xilin was also silent for a while. He didn't say anything, but his hands were tightly clenched into fists and his palms were sweaty. Look, the wind and waves on the sea are a little unusual. Leng Shuang looked at the sea. Because of his master's ascension tribulation, the sea was a little different from usual, and the waves would be bigger. However, it was rare to see a wave that was 7 or 8 meters high. Because of her words, they looked at the surface of the sea. Indeed, they saw a wave surging on the surface of the sea. Accompanied by the whistling of the sea wind, it surged violently towards the shore. The momentum was so terrifying that it caused their expressions to become serious. If the wave hit them, Fengjiu, who was sitting on the rock, would be affected as well. However, just as this thought flashed through their minds, they saw a loud crack in the sky. A bolt of lightning struck down, and at the same time, a destructive bolt of lightning struck down towards Fengjiu. No one noticed that Fengjiu, who was surrounded by lightning, threw a pill into her mouth when the dazzling bolt of lightning flashed across the sky. At the same time, she turned her hand and an ancient mirror appeared in her palm. The momentum and pressure of the lightning and thunder struck down on Fengjiu's body. At that moment, there seemed to be 4 different auras faintly appearing between the lightning and the lightning. The 4 different auras transformed into the shape of dragons, which roared and rushed towards Fengjiu. The destructive aura of death also struck down at that moment. Boom! It was a loud bang that shook the 9 heavens. The whole world seemed to be trembling, and the land of the East Sea spiritual region was shaking. Some of the ground even cracked because it couldn't withstand the terrifying pressure. When the lightning and thunder mixed with the 4 destructive auras struck down on Fengjiu's body, a strong and dazzling light burst out from her body like the sun. There seemed to be a faint cracking sound, like the sound of a mirror shattering. Master! Xiao Jiu! Everyone couldn't help but cry out in alarm. The destructive aura of death was too powerful, and the dazzling light was too dazzling. As a result, the place where she stood was filled with dazzling light. No one could see her at all. Mother! 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 On Cloud Sky Mountain, the 3 children shouted with red eyes. 3 pairs of eyes stared intently at the image. However, in the next moment, the image that they were staring at seemed to have been disturbed by something and disappeared before their eyes. Mother! Boo-hoo! Big brother, I can't see mother, I can't see mother. Chapter 48:11. Hao and Mu Chen were also anxious. Their eyes turned red when they saw the disappearing image. Why did it disappear? Why can't we see it? Master, Master! The 2 of them hurriedly shouted. Their voices, which carried the aura of spiritual power, spread throughout the entire Cloud Sky Mountain with anxiety and panic. The Qing Emperor, who was in the clouds of Cloud Sky Mountain, heard their voices and knew why they were so anxious. However, he was also very surprised. At this moment, he could not see Fengjiu's situation and could not divert his attention to respond to his 3 disciples at this moment. He focused his mind and used his divine sense to explore the immortal realm again. However, he was shocked and quickly retracted his divine sense. In the East Sea spiritual region, in the dazzling light of the sun, 4 powerful airflows and pressure visible to the naked eye were refracted from the light and attacked the 9 heavens above. They were so fast and powerful that they were as terrifying as the 4 destructive auras that struck Fengjiu. In the sky above the celestial realm, the 4 emperors were looking down to see if Fengjiu had been annihilated. Unexpectedly, in the next moment, a torrential stream of air suddenly attacked the 4 of them. Because the 4 auras were familiar to them, they were unable to react or dodge in time. Just like that, they were sent flying by the 4 streams of air. Whoosh! Bang! The 4 powerful airflows cut through the air and landed on the 4 great emperors. Even though the 4 of them were powerful, they were still sent flying. The moment they spat out blood, their figures flew hundreds of meters away. After spinning a few times in the air, they fell down. Ah! Screams and exclamations came from the 4 of them. However, the 4 of them fell down from the clouds due to the heavy impact and disappeared in a short while. The only thing that could be seen was that the four of them seemed to be seriously injured. The Qing Emperor of Cloud Sky Mountain saw this scene. Mo Chen, who was in the immortal abode, also saw this scene. After being stunned for a moment, the two of them smiled. The former was surprised and expectant, while the latter was relieved and relieved. At the same time, in the Spirit Sea region, the dark clouds that shrouded the entire sky dispersed under the dazzling light. The aura of death and destruction in the air, as well as the powerful airflow and pressure, all disappeared without a trace as the light gradually dispersed. Even the 7 or 8 meter high waves on the sea disappeared in an instant, only splashing a layer of water. The oppressive aura dispersed and what appeared was the moving celestial music that came from the blue sky and the immortal light path that shone down from the 9 heavens. The 7-colored rainbow stretched across the sea and extended to the large rock that Fengjiu was on. The immortal light appeared. She slowly opened her eyes. Her clear eyes shined brightly as she looked at the celestial path that had appeared in the sky. She stood up against the wind. Chapter 48:12. Master. Xiao Jiu. Ah Jiu. Du Fan, Guan Shilin, and the rest looked at this scene with tears of excitement in their eyes. They shouted loudly and waved at Fengjiu, who was standing against the wind. After more than 20 days of anxiety, they could finally put down their worries at this moment. At this moment, there was only excitement and joy in everyone's hearts. She had finally made it through. She was finally going to ascend to the 9 heavens. From the moment the last bolt of lightning struck, she possessed a body of celestial bones and an unparalleled lifespan that was as long as the heavens and the earth. Looking at the red figure who was standing against the wind and shrouded in holy light and heavenly music, everyone's eyes were filled with pride. That was their master, that was their family. After hearing their voices, Fengjiu slowly turned around. Her red dress drew a beautiful arc as she turned around. After she turned around, the red dress also fluttered in the wind, creating a circle of enchanting petals. Amidst the holy light, her figure gradually flew up and her feet left the ground. She stood there quietly. When her quiet gaze fell on the familiar faces, there was a trace of gentleness in it. A beautiful smile bloomed on her peerless face. Take care of my family for me. I'm leaving, but I'll be back. Her voice came from the sky. Her voice was soft, but it contained a firm conviction and clearly entered everyone's ears. Don't worry, Master. Your subordinates will definitely not disappoint Master's trust. Du Fan and the rest said in unison. They cupped their fists and bowed, kneeling on one knee. Each of them raised their heads and watched as their master gradually disappeared into the distance. Audio. We'll wait for you to come back. You have to take care of yourself. You must be well. Wanyan Qianhua shouted loudly and waved at Fengjiu. Xiao Jiu, you have to take care of yourself. You have us at home, don't worry. Guan Shilin also shouted loudly and waved at her. He watched as her figure gradually moved towards the rainbow bridge in the holy light until she reached the 7-colored clouds in the sky. When the heavenly music in the sky gradually dissipated, the heavenly aura in the air gradually dissipated, and the holy light gradually disappeared. The 7-colored path in the sky also disappeared without a trace, along with the dazzling red figure. Seeing her ascend, Wanyan Qianhua, Guan Shilin, and the rest retracted their gazes and looked at each other. Guan Shilin grinned and said in a clear voice, I'm going back to the Feng family's mansion to tell grandfather and the others this good news. They'll be very happy to hear this news. Hearing this, we'll go back with you to see them. Speaking, I haven't seen them for a long time. Now, there's no need to worry about her. Now that Xiao has successfully ascending, there's nothing to worry about her. We'll go back with you. Okay. Guan Shilin responded and looked at Du Fan and the others. He wondered what arrangements Xiao Jiu made for them before she left. Du Fan and the others had already stood up. Hearing their words, Du Fan and the others discussed for a while before walking over. Chapter 48:13. Seeing this, Guan Shilin nodded and said, "Well, you don't have to worry about the old residents. Just do as Xiao Jiu told you before he ascended." "We know," they said, and then cupped their hands to Guan Shilin, Wanyan Qianhua, and Jun Ju Shan. "Please send our greetings and congratulations to Old Master and the others. If there is anything that needs to be solved, just send us a message and we will deal with it." "Ha ha ha, congratulations." The sovereigns who had been watching Fengzhou's ascension walked over with smiles on their faces and cupped their hands to congratulate them. The South Qing sovereign's face was full of smiles, and his tone was kind and amiable. He said to Guan Shilin and the others, "The ghost doctor has finally ascended. This is really a joyous occasion. We were lucky enough to see the ghost doctor's ascension, and we are even more shocked and excited. After a few days, we will definitely bring congratulatory gifts and visit Old Master and the others at the Feng family's old residence." Guan Shilin cupped his hands and returned the greeting. He smiled and said, "Okay, I will definitely report to my adoptive father and the others when I return. We will wait for your arrival." After exchanging a few pleasantries, the sovereigns left first. Guan Shilin, Du Fan, and the others arranged for the Phoenix Guards to guard the sea area and then went to the spaceship. At the same time, in Cloud Sky Mountain, Qing Emperor was walking on the wind with his hands clasped behind his back. When he saw Hao, and Mu Chen who were so anxious that their eyes were red, as well as Yu, who was crying due to worry, the corners of his mouth curled up and he smiled. "Why are you crying? Your mother's ascension is a joyous occasion, isn't it?" Hearing his voice and seeing him come back, the three children hurriedly ran toward him. "Master!" Yu's eyes were still tearing, and she was crying very sadly. When she saw him, she threw herself at him and cried loudly, "Master, my mother can't see her, we can't see her, woo-woo. Master, our mother." Hao and Mu Chen also surrounded him, looking at him anxiously and worriedly. But before they could finish, he interrupted them. "All right, there's no need to say any more. There's no need to cry. Your mother is fine and has successfully ascended." Seeing their worried and anxious expressions, and seeing his little disciple crying so much, he raised his hand and waved it. The image that had disappeared reappeared in front of them. "Ah! It's mother!" Yu hastily wiped her tears, fearing that tears would cloud her eyes and make her unable to see her mother's appearance. "Mother has successfully ascended," Hao and Mu Chen said at the same time. Their faces were full of surprise and excitement. Especially when they saw their mother slowly ascending, they were even more excited. "It's really mother. Little sister, quickly look." Mu Chen pulled Yu's hand, and his little face was filled with joy. "Mother, mother!" Yu shouted, and tiptoed, wanting to get closer to her mother. The Qing Emperor looked at Fengzhou in the image, then glanced at his three disciples and said, "She has successfully ascended. Can you be relieved this time?" Not only did Fengzhou successfully ascend, but he also used some kind of treasure to seriously injure the four great emperors. Even he didn't dare to release his divine sense to investigate at that moment, which was enough to show how powerful that treasure was. Chapter 48:14. It's fine as long as mother is fine. Hao smiled. Because of this smile, his little face looked a lot more lively. He had the vitality and happiness that people of his age should have. "Shifu, can we go see mother?" Mu Chen asked, looking at their Shifu. "Master, take us to see mother. We miss mother so much." Yu also said, pulling on their master's sleeve. Emperor Qing glanced at them and said, "Have you forgotten what I told you? Even if your mother ascends, you can't go see her, and you can't let others know about your relationship with her. Otherwise, if her enemies can't do anything to her, they will think of ways to do something to you and use you to threaten her." When he saw their disappointed expressions, he clasped his hands behind his back and sighed softly. Master is doing this for your own good. You'd better focus on your cultivation. With that, he flicked his sleeve and erased the image. Ah! Master! You, cried out in alarm when she saw that the image of their mother was wiped away by her master. She looked up at him with a red face. Emperor Qin turned around and walked back to his cave. He said indifferently, "Go back and cultivate. It's fine as long as you know that your mother is fine. As for the rest, it's not something you can worry about right now." Knowing that their master always meant what he said, the three of them didn't ask for any more help. They could only walk back with a lonely expression. At Mo Chen's immortal mansion, after seeing that Fengzhou had successfully ascended, he didn't pay any more attention to it. No matter what, now that she had successfully ascended, he didn't need to worry about other things. Fengzhou ascended. Somewhere in the immortal realm, celestial music reverberated in the sky. A celestial island appeared, and a majestic palace was completed amidst the light. Her immortal mansion was also the same as Mo Chen's immortal mansion a year ago. Only the palace and environment were slightly different. However, it was still in the same immortal mansion. Hundreds of flowers bloomed on the island, hundreds of fruits grew on the branches, red-crowned cranes flew, and magpies sang happily. A seven-colored rainbow bridge spanned across the immortal island, adding a dazzling scenery to this fairyland-like island where hundreds of flowers were blooming. However, compared to Mo Chen's immortal abode, which was bustling with activity when the monarchs came to present gifts, Fengzhou's immortal abode was cold and cheerless. Not a single person came to congratulate or present gifts. What she didn't know was that the sovereigns under her jurisdiction had long heard of the enmity between the four great emperors and her, and that they wanted to kill her. Therefore, even though she had become a great emperor in this world, those sovereigns didn't dare to visit her, for fear that they would offend the other four great emperors if they congratulated this newly ascended great emperor. Compared to this, Fengzhou didn't care much. At this time, her figure landed on the rainbow bridge and stood on it, looking at the private island that belonged to her. It could only be said that this was an island that stretched as far as the eye could see. In addition to her newly built immortal residence, there were several mountains that reached into the clouds behind the palace, layer upon layer, and a forest that seemed to have no end. Chapter 48:15. It's as beautiful as a fairyland. This must be the place they're talking about, right? She murmured softly. She was in a very good mood. After going through so many difficulties, she had finally successfully ascended to immortality. At this moment, she was naturally overjoyed. In this place, on this island that was as beautiful as a fairyland, how she wished that her husband and her children could be by her side at this moment. They could share her joy and share this fairyland. Mose, if only you were here too, how great would that be? She said softly. A trace of regret flashed across her heart. But it doesn't matter. I came here first, so I'll take care of this place first. This place will be our home in the future. It will be a place where our family can reunite. A determined light flashed across her eyes. Her clear eyes looked at this fairyland, and a sincere smile appeared on her face. In the next moment, she waved her sleeves and several rays of light flew out. Some rose into the air and circled in the sky, while others leaped and landed steadily on the ground. Master! 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 Joyful and excited voices rang out from Fengzhou's contracted beasts. When the fire phoenix rose into the air, it revealed its true form with a flash of light. The huge figure of the fire phoenix soared in the sky. Its flaming wings flapped, and it raised its head. A phoenix cry reverberated in the sky. It penetrated deep into the clouds and reverberated in the sky, reaching every corner of the island below. In that instant, in the endless forest, when the beasts heard the phoenix cry from the ancient mythical beast, they all lowered their bodies and knelt down. Their mouths emitted cries, and they didn't even dare to raise their heads. At this moment, due to the appearance of the fire phoenix, the beasts in the forest clearly knew that such a powerful ancient divine beast was guarding this island. When Tun Yun, Lao Bai, and the other contracted beasts saw the fire phoenix hovering in the sky and raising its head to chirp, they knew what it was trying to do. Therefore, they only glanced at it in the sky before looking around happily. They jumped up and scurried around the area, then returned to the bottom of the Rainbow Bridge to congratulate their master. Fengjiu stood on the Rainbow Immortal Bridge, facing the wind. She looked into the distance with a faint smile on her lips. She watched as the immortal crane transformed into an immortal servant, as well as the flower immortal and the others transformed from the flowers. They leisurely walked over behind Old White and the other contracted beasts. When they reached the bottom of the Rainbow Immortal Bridge, they bowed respectfully. Congratulations to the Phoenix Master for ascending and becoming an immortal. Gentle voices of congratulations sounded from their mouths, and they were nothing more than some auspicious words of congratulations for her ascension. Fengjiu raised his hand and some medicinal pills flew into their hands. He said slowly, "All right, you guys can leave first. Go and prepare a place to rest. Also, I need some information. You guys are responsible for finding out for me." Her gaze landed on the 4 immortal servants transformed from the cranes. When the 4 immortal servants heard her words, they didn't hesitate and respectfully replied, "Yes, we will follow the Phoenix Master's orders." Chapter 48:16. The fire phoenix flapped her wings and brought Fengjiu to circle above the immortal island, checking the area they occupied and the boundaries they had set up. The 4 great emperors who had been injured by the counterattack had already returned to their respective immortal mansions. Once they returned, they immediately went into seclusion to cultivate. They only instructed their subordinates to be on high alert in case someone attacked them. After one of the great emperors entered his mansion and closed the door, the blood in his chest could no longer be suppressed and spurted out. He staggered backward, holding on to the table and chair as he came to his bed. He leaned against the headboard and gasped for breath. His face was pale as he leaned against the headboard. He took out a pill from his space and swallowed it. After resting for a while, he sat cross-legged to heal his injuries. It was not until 2 days later that he opened his eyes. "Fengjiu. How could he injure me to this extent?" He said hatefully, but in his heart, he also knew that the powerful air current that had injured him was actually the air current that they had used to attack Fengjiu. However, for some reason, their attack had been reflected back at them, causing them to be seriously injured. What kind of treasure is that? How could it reflect their attacks? He muttered. He couldn't understand. How could there be such a powerful treasure in the lower immortal realm? And it had been obtained by Fengjiu. Thinking of the other 3 who had also suffered from the same backlash, he thought for a while, then got up and walked out of the room. Right now, he was afraid that he could not go into seclusion to regulate his breathing and heal his injuries. This attack had injured them too severely. Even if they had taken medicinal pills to recuperate for 2 days, they could only get out of bed and walk around. If they were to really use their qi to attack, it was impossible for them to do so in their current physical condition. Especially when he had just checked that he only had 30% of his strength left. If Fengjiu were to attack him at this time, he would definitely die. Therefore, while Fengjiu had just ascended, he had to do something to obstruct her so that she would not have the chance to seek revenge. Therefore, after leaving the room, he ordered someone to send a message to the immortal monarchs, immortal elders, and monarchs in the area under his control, asking them to deal with the newly ascended great emperor. At the same time, he personally sent a message to the other 3 great emperors, informing them of his plans. At the same time, he also asked them to make preparations to unite the sovereigns and immortal monarchs under his jurisdiction to launch a crusade against Fengjiu. After all, with the strength of the sovereigns, it was impossible to deal with the newly ascended great emperor Fengjiu. If they were asked to deal with him, it was very likely that they would retreat because they had to fight. Therefore, he planned to let the sovereigns and the various sects and clans under the jurisdiction of the four great emperors work together to cut off the resources in the area under Fengzhou's jurisdiction. Almost as soon as he gave the order, the sovereigns anxiously called for a meeting to discuss this matter. At the same time, Mo Chen, who had received the news from the sovereign below, only smiled and told them not to get involved in this matter. After instructing the Immortal Mansion's immortal maidservant to guard the Immortal Mansion, he flicked his sleeves and flew out of the Immortal Island alone into the clouds. Chapter 48:17. If it was in the past, it would take at least 2 days to travel from the Immortal Island he belonged to the Immortal Island on the other side of the sky. After becoming the great emperors of this world, they had many immortal bodies, and one of them was called shrinking Earth into inches. It took him half a day to arrive at Fengzhou's floating island in the sky. He stood in the clouds and looked at the Immortal Island in front of him, which was covered in clouds. He could faintly see the corner of the magnificent palace and the faintly discernible mountain peak. He walked closer to take a look. As expected, there was a barrier around the Immortal Island. He smiled faintly and went around to the main entrance. When he arrived at the entrance, he called out, "Ah Joe, it's me." His voice was slow and gentle, but it contained a strong aura of spiritual power. It clearly passed through the clouds and the barrier and entered Fengzhou's ears. Hearing Mo Chen's voice, Fengzhou's eyes lit up. She immediately got up and walked outside. Because it was Mo Chen, she personally went to the entrance and opened the barrier to invite him in. "Mo Chen, why are you here?" Fengzhou looked at him, who was dressed in white and looked like an immortal, and asked with a smile. Mo Chen walked in and followed her for a while. Only then did she get a good look at the interior of the building. With a gentle smile on his face, he said softly, "I should have come to congratulate you 2 days ago when you ascended. However, I thought that since you just ascended, there would be many people congratulating you, so I postponed it for 2 days." As he spoke, he paused and looked at her, saying, "I see that your place is even bigger than my Immortal Island, and the environment is very charming." His gaze fell on the rainbow bridge that spanned the entire Immortal Island not far away, and a trace of surprise flashed across his eyes. That rainbow bridge didn't disappear. Hearing his words, Fengzhou chuckled and said, "That rainbow bridge won't disappear. It can be walked on. It appeared after you ascended." As she spoke, she strolled with him and said, "Since the completion of my immortal abode, you are the only guest who has come. I really haven't seen anyone else." "Oh." Mo Chen raised his eyebrows and looked at her. "Do you know the reason?" "Yes, it's the doing of the 4 great emperors," she said slowly, looking at the road ahead. Walking slowly, she said carelessly, "The 4 great emperors joined forces to deal with me. They even reached their hands into my territory and threatened the sovereigns and sects under my jurisdiction. They are probably afraid of the 4 great emperors. After all, they are authoritative figures in the upper immortal realm. How much do they know about a newly ascended great emperor like me?" Mo Chen smiled when she heard this, and she said, "I figured that since you've just ascended into the immortal realm, you wouldn't know much about the exalted immortal realm. So, besides bringing you news, I've also come to tell you the information I've gathered over the past year." The two of them walked to a pavilion and sat down. 2 immortal servants served tea and left, quietly waiting at a place far away. "What news did you bring me?" Fengzhou asked as she took a sip of tea. "I've received news that the 4 great emperors have given the order to cut off the supply of resources to the area under your jurisdiction. They will probably use other methods to suppress and deal with you in the future." As Mo Chen spoke, she picked up the tea in front of her and took a sip. Chapter 48:18. Mo Chen smiled when he saw that she was not worried at all. "Aren't you worried?" "Worried? What's there to be worried about?" Fengzhou replied casually as she played with the teacup in her hand. "Currently, none of my subordinates have come looking for me. Naturally, I haven't received any news about this. I'm not in a hurry. Let's wait until they can't hold it in any longer and come looking for me. Furthermore, since they don't respect me, I naturally have to teach them a lesson, don't I? Mo Chen shook his head and chuckled when he heard this. This was indeed her character. Since she was not worried, she would naturally have a solution. Therefore, he did not continue on this topic. Instead, he asked, how are you going to deal with the 4 sovereigns? Fengjiu played with the teacup as the corners of her lips curled up into a smile. However, her eyes were cold and there was even a cold glint in them. The 4 of them have suffered heavy injuries. It's impossible for them to recover in a short period of time. Now that I've just ascended, I'm not familiar with this world yet. Therefore, I'll let them live for a few more days. Sooner or later, I'll settle this score with the 4 of them. Now that the 4 of them had been injured by their own strength, they would definitely go into closed-door cultivation because they were worried that she would come looking for them. Even if she went looking for them, they might not necessarily be hiding in their immortal abodes. Therefore, it was better to put this matter aside and deal with the matter at hand first. Furthermore, she needed to understand what kind of existence the forces in the upper immortal realm were. It's right that you didn't make a sudden move. The 4 great emperors have existed for too long. Their forces are definitely not as simple as they appear on the surface. Furthermore, some of the other great emperors have friendly relations with them. Furthermore, even if you went looking for them, I'm afraid they wouldn't be in their immortal abodes. Mo Chen glanced at her as he spoke. He then took out some information from the space and handed it to her. This is some information that I've collected over the past year. Before we ascended, there were already 10 great emperors on this list. However, some of them are in seclusion and don't appear easily. Therefore, the information we can get is limited. Fengjiu took the information and flipped through it. She smiled and said, thank you. This information is very useful to me. Mo Chen smiled and said, the 4 great emperors who want to deal with you are full of ambition. According to what I know, they're afraid of the prophecy about you becoming the Lord of the heavens and earth, so they want to deal with you. As for the others, they've been in seclusion for many years. Hearing his words, Feng Jiuqiu didn't mind at first. Instead, she flipped through the information in the book. However, when she heard that he had taken in 3 disciples, her hand that was flipping through the information stopped. She raised her head and looked at Mo Chen, waiting for him to finish speaking. After he finished, she couldn't help but smile and said, now that you mention it, I know who you're talking about. Chapter 48:19. Fengjiu chuckled and said, yes, I know him. I even know his 3 disciples. Looking at her expression and the smile on her face, a thought flashed across his mind. He said in surprise, could it be her 3 children? Fengjiu nodded and smiled, it's a long story, but it's definitely them. Seeing this, Mo Chen smiled, I know. How perceptive was he? As long as she said it, he would naturally be able to guess. He just did not know how she knew the Qing Emperor. How did the 3 children become the Qing Emperor's disciples? That's right, I have something to ask you, Mo Chen said. What is it? Fengjiu looked at him and asked. On the day of your immortal ascension, where did the treasure that injured the 4 great emperors come from? What kind of treasure is it? How could it be so powerful? After all, they were so far away. Moreover, what kind of people were the 4 great emperors? To think that such a person could be injured, and in such an unguarded situation at that. Fengjiu did not expect him to ask about this. After being stunned for a moment, she chuckled, it's a mirror. However, it's not an ordinary mirror. Many years ago, when I was she told him in detail about how the monkey lured her to the cave and how she obtained the mirror that could open a passage to another world. After hearing her words, Mo Chen was slightly surprised, you obtained it like that? I didn't expect it to be such an incredible treasure. I'm afraid it's not an ordinary item. Actually, I didn't expect it to be so effective either. Unfortunately, the mirror shattered after reflecting the 4 great emperors' attacks. When I ascended, I saw that it had already been shattered into pieces, she said with some pity. Fortunately, you had that treasure with you back then. Otherwise, you might not have been able to endure the attacks of the 4 great emperors. Mo Chen shook her head and said slowly, I can only say that all of this was predestined. Now that I've successfully ascended, but Moze. She sighed softly. Thinking about Moze who was still in the spirit sea of the East Sea, her heart felt heavy. She did not know when he would wake up. Who knew when he would ascend? She could only hope that the power of the green lotus she had given him at that time would be of help to him. Hearing her mention Moze, Mo Chen was reminded of his master. Therefore, his expression softened as he said, Don't worry. Heaven helps the worthy. What's more, my master risked his life to give him a chance to live, so he won't die so easily. It's only a matter of time before he wakes up and ascends. One day, he will come here to reunite with you. Yes, Fengjiu replied, then looked at Mo Chen and said, I'm sorry. Because of Moze, your master lost his life. Mo Chen shook his head and said, everything is fated. Moreover, my master has already seen through life and death. Every decision he makes must have his reasons. Actually, there was one more thing that he did not tell her. Because his master had revealed too many secrets of heaven, his lifespan had been reduced, and he was fated to face this calamity. He could not blame anyone for this. The two of them chatted in the pavilion. Mo Chen told Fengjiu about the immortal realm in detail, helping her understand everything about the immortal realm in the shortest time possible. At the bottom of the spirit sea of the East Sea, an endless stream of spiritual energy was madly surging into the boundary. Everything was absorbed into the body of the sleeping Xianyuan Mo's. Chapter 48-20. Gu Mo and Wei Feng were guarding the eastern sea. When they saw the storm on the surface of the sea sweep up, they couldn't help but exchange glances with each other, and then they raised their energy and flew out of the flying ship to arrive on the surface of the sea to take a look. The aura of spirit energy is surging violently at the bottom of the sea. Could it be that the Yama Lord? Wei Feng looked at Gu Mo with a trace of surprise on his face. His divine sense spread out and noticed that the spirit energy at the bottom of the sea was surging violently towards a certain place, yet he was unable to detect where the Yama Lord was. It was probably the barrier that their master had set up that blocked the detection of his divine sense. Gu Mo pondered and said, Master said that the Yama Lord might wake up, but it shouldn't be now. According to what Master said, the Yama Lord probably won't wake up until 3 to 5 years later. The fluctuations in the sea today are probably a sign that the Yama Lord's condition is gradually improving. Wei Feng said, since it's like that, then let's observe for 2 days and see what exactly is going on. Okay. Gu Mo responded. Seeing that there were no other strange phenomena on the surface of the sea other than the waves and the surging of spiritual energy, the two of them headed towards the flying ship first. I wonder how Master is after ascending. Did she encounter any trouble? Wei Feng couldn't help but look towards the sky as he spoke. Because of Master's ascension, even their communication jade with Master had been cut off. Even if they wanted to know about Master, they had no way of finding out. Don't worry. Even if Master goes to the celestial world alone, she'll definitely take good care of herself. Even if she encounters trouble, with Master's ability and methods, could it be that you're worried that she won't be able to deal with it? Gu Mo revealed a wisp of a smile and said, we only need to properly carry out the task of guarding Master here. Master said that she'll definitely return. Right, didn't I hear from Du Fan that Hui Lang and Ing Yi are coming over? Why haven't they arrived yet? Wei Feng asked as he recalled the two people he hadn't seen for a long time. It's not like you don't know that ever since the Yama Lord's accident, the two of them have taken over the Yama Lord's work. In addition, the world under the Yama Lord is in turmoil because of the Yama Lord situation. With so many things requiring their attention, how can they possibly leave? Guo descended onto the flying ship and called 2 phoenix guards to patrol the surface of the sea, whereas, he and Wei Feng walked to the small table at the bow of the ship and sat down. He said, they weren't even able to rush over when Master ascended, so it's obvious how busy they are. Wei Feng nodded. After he sat down, he poured 2 cups of wine and said, right, with the Yama Lord's current situation and Master isn't here, if they don't keep an eye on it, then it'll probably fall into chaos. The 2 of them had a few drinks on the spaceship and chatted. Time passed unknowingly, the celestial world. After Fengjiu sent off Mo Chen, he instructed Fire Phoenix, Senior White, and the other contracted beasts to guard the celestial world while he left with Tun Yun. He intended to take a stroll in the territory she was in charge of. Dressed in red, she was as dazzling as the sun. Even if she restrained her pressure and cultivation, her outstanding temperament and peerless elegance still attracted the attention of everyone wherever she went. Chapter 48-21. However, the people here were afraid of the 4 great emperors. On the day of her ascension, not a single sovereign or immortal elder came to the island to congratulate her. Even though she did not take those people seriously, she could not allow them to look down on her. Today, she left her residence to take a look at her territory. Secondly, she wanted to see how they would deal with the problem of cutting off their supply of resources. Furthermore, there were too few people in her immortal residence, especially a lack of kitchen maids. Therefore, she wanted to bring a few people back with her. However, not long after she entered the city, she heard a commotion in front of her as she walked on the street. What's going on? Why did the price of the spiritual rice increase so much? This is not normal. A middle-aged man who looked like a housekeeper said. He frowned and shouted, it's not the first time our Guo family has dealt with you. The price of the spiritual rice has increased so much. You should give us an explanation. Housekeeper Guo, the price of the spiritual rice is not up to us. It's my master. We have no choice. The shopkeeper in the shop sighed helplessly. Could it be that what I heard is true? A cultivator next to him said in surprise. What is true? Someone next to him asked. Don't you know? I heard a rogue cultivator friend say that someone above gave the order to cut off the supply of resources in our territory. I'm afraid that not long after, the price of the spiritual rice will not only increase, but it will also be difficult to find a single grain. The cultivator said with a serious expression. This can't be. Someone next to him said in shock. Why can't it be? It's not like you don't know that not long ago, our territory was divided under the jurisdiction of the newly ascended Great Emperor. It said that the newly ascended Great Emperor is a woman who ascended from the lower immortal world. Think about it, how can a woman who ascended from the lower immortal world compete with the other great emperors? The cultivator said. Seeing that everyone was listening curiously, he continued, moreover, it is said that this empress has a grudge with the other 4 great emperors. That's why such a thing happened. There is one more thing you must not know. I heard that other places are wantonly absorbing powerful families. I'm afraid that in a few years, there won't be many powerful people left in the territory under our empress's jurisdiction. How dare you? Who are you? How dare you bewitch people here? A delicate voice suddenly shouted, giving everyone a fright. The cultivator who spoke was even more shocked. He instinctively took a few steps back and looked for the voice. He found that it was a little girl of about 5 years old. She gave me a fright. So it's a little girl. The cultivator exhaled softly and calmed down. He looked at her from the corner of his eye and said coldly, little girl, you're quite imposing. But, didn't your parents teach you not to be rude to your elders? Also, you're not bewitching people. You're just bewitching people with your lies. Chapter 48-22. In an inconspicuous corner, Fengjiu was leaning against the wall. When he saw this scene and the little girl, he couldn't help but reveal a smile. Her smile was like a blossoming flower, like a spring breeze, and like a feather gently brushing across one's heart, causing those who were secretly looking at her to be involuntarily stunned. They foolishly stared at that beautiful face and that enchanting smile that bloomed at the corner of the beauty's lips. How could there be such a beauty in this world? Every frown and smile of hers could move one's heart and soul. Her eyes were even more enchanting, causing people to be uncontrollably captivated by her peerlessly beautiful face. Little girl, you need to be taught a lesson. The cultivator's face turned slightly red. He wanted to take a step forward to scare her, but he was stopped by someone next to him. I say, it's best if you don't touch her. This is the Shu family's most favored young miss. Steward Guo glanced at the cultivator and said, if she loses a single hair, you won't be able to leave this city alive. The cultivator's heart shook when he heard this. He quickly stopped and his face turned pale. Humph. When I go back, I'm going to tell grandfather that you're trying to confuse people with your lies. Our family won't casually move. Our family has lived here for generations, we won't move. The little girl's tender voice had the softness of a little girl and was very pleasing to the ear. Because the cultivator knew that this little girl was the young miss of the Shu clan, he didn't dare to say anything more. Instead, he said, I won't bicker with a little girl like you. With that, he flicked his sleeve and left the crowd. Hee, 11th young miss, do you still remember me? Steward Guo walked up with a smile and asked, why are you here alone? Your entourage. I remember, your big sister Guo's steward. The little girl smiled and two sweet little dimples appeared on her little face. Her voice was soft as she said, I came out with my second brother, but he saw big sister Guo and couldn't move, so I snuck away. Hearing this, Steward Guo was startled and asked, you're my young miss? Yes. The little girl nodded and pointed behind her, they're picking things from the treasure shop over there. Hearing this, Steward Guo quickly said, why don't 11th young miss come with us? It's not safe for you to be alone. Hee, it's very safe. My second brother often says that I look very safe. Also, many people in the city know me, so no one will hit me. She said with a smile. Feng Jiu, who was in the corner, couldn't help but burst out laughing when she heard her words. Perhaps because she heard the laughter, the little girl's chubby and cute little face wrinkled as she asked, who's laughing at me? She followed the voice and saw Feng Jiu, who was dressed in red, leaning against the corner of the wall. Wow! Her eyes widened, and her long eyelashes fluttered as she stared at Feng Jiu. At this time, the surrounding people also noticed the beautiful woman in red at the corner of the wall. For a moment, they were all stunned. Chapter 48-23. However, they had never seen someone like this woman who had the essence of heaven and earth. Not only was she beautiful, but her aura was also outstanding. Especially with her red dress, it was hard for people to take their eyes off her. There were thousands of beauties, but each had a different style. Even though they had seen many beauties in the cultivation world, they had to admit that the beauty of this woman in red was above all the beauties in the world. She was like a bright moon in the sky. When others were around her, no matter how dazzling they were, they could only shine like stars. When Feng Jiu saw that everyone was staring at her, her beautiful brows furrowed slightly, and the smile on her lips disappeared. She glanced at the cute little girl with baby fat and smiled at her, then turned to leave. Seeing the little girl, she couldn't help thinking of her daughter, Yu, who was also so cute. However, she hadn't seen them for a long time. She didn't know if they were used to following Emperor Qing. How much taller had they grown now? She wanted to see them, but she suppressed this idea as soon as it arose. Now was not the right time. She thought as she walked. After walking for a distance, she suddenly stopped and looked at the little girl beside her. She stopped when she stopped and looked at the little girl who was looking up at her with her chubby little face. Little girl, why are you following me? Fengjiu raised her eyebrows and asked. Sister, you are so beautiful. This is the first time Xian has met someone as beautiful as you. She smiled sweetly, and with her smile, 2 cute little dimples appeared on her round little face. Without waiting for Fengjiu to speak, she moved closer to Fengjiu with small steps. She was so close that she was almost beside Fengjiu. Fengjiu looked at her, raised her eyebrows, and didn't say anything. She wanted to see what she wanted to do. My grandfather said that near ink is black, near vermilion will become red. Then if I get closer to you, will I become like you? Her soft words were naive, and Fengjiu couldn't help laughing. What kind of family was the Shu family? How did they teach such a strange and cute little girl? Fengjiu smiled, squatted down, and said, Me. I'm old enough to be your mother, so you can't call me sister, but you can call me aunt. Also, even if you follow me and get close to me, you won't become like me. However, you're already very good like this. You're very cute and very lucky. She reached out and gently pinched the little girl's chubby little face, and chuckled, You are still young now. When you grow up, you will slowly become more beautiful. The little girl rolled her eyes and looked down at the hand that was pinching her little face. She blinked and asked, Then beautiful aunt, when Xian grows up in the future, will I become like beautiful aunt? You, Fengjiu's little girl, Fengjiuxu's eyes, you'll look like your father and mother, the little girl, her little, in the next moment, her little, frown, her little girl, and then, actually, her head raised her head, wah-ah. Woo-woo. I don't want to be like my father, woo-woo. I don't want to. Chapter 48-24. Alright. Don't cry anymore. You won't look good if you keep crying. She hurriedly coaxed him, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Hearing that he wouldn't look good if he kept crying, the little one hurriedly stopped and wiped away his tears. He looked at her pitifully and asked curiously, Beautiful aunt, do you have children? Are your children the same? Are they very good looking? Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled. Thinking of her 2 little darlings, her gaze softened, Yes, they're a little older than you. They're twins and look exactly the same. They're both very good looking. Wow! They look exactly the same. What would they look like? She exclaimed curiously, Xian has never seen 2 people who look exactly the same. Fengjiu smiled and rubbed her hair, saying, Alright, you should go back quickly. Don't let your family worry. Beautiful aunt, can you send me home? I'll ask my grandfather to treat you to a meal. She looked up at her, her face full of hope. Fengjiu wanted to refuse, but seeing this little one looking at her expectantly, and the person who was called Butler Gua following behind, she thought for a moment, then said, I'll send you back. I'll leave after you get home. Beautiful aunt, come with me. I'll take you home. She automatically ignored the last sentence and held Fengjiu's hand as they walked, saying, I live in a big courtyard with my grandfather. Usually, only my brothers come to the courtyard to play with me. Let me tell you, my grandfather is very powerful. He knows everything. He even knows how to make grasshoppers from grass for me. Fengjiu listened quietly, a smile on her lips. Hearing her mention her grandfather, she also thought of her grandfather. Now that she had ascended to this place alone, she might not be able to see them for a long time in the future. Although she was reluctant to part with them, she knew that they were all well, and that was enough. At the same time, the Shu residence's guards hurried over and found their family's second young master in the shop. Second young master, go back quickly. Something happened at home. Second young master Shu had just bought a jade hairpin for his sweetheart and was chatting with her. When he heard the guard's anxious words, he couldn't help but be startled, asking, What happened at home? Someone came to seek revenge, and there are quite a few strong cultivators. Second young master, bring little miss back quickly. As the guard spoke, he looked around but couldn't see the little figure. He couldn't help but ask, second young master, where's little miss? That was the pearl in the hands of the Shu family's masters. Xin. Isn't Xin here? He was shocked. Only now did he remember his little sister. He looked around, but he didn't see the little girl's figure. His handsome face was full of anxiety. She was here just now. How did she disappear? The Guo family's fourth young mistress said as she turned to the servants beside her, hurry up and help me find Xin. Young miss, second young master. Housekeeper Guo walked in and said, I saw 11th young miss on the street just now. She left with a lady in red. I was worried that 11th young miss would be in danger, so I followed her for a while. Later, I saw little miss leading that lady to the Shu residence, so I came to fetch my young miss. Chapter 48-25. On the other side, Fengjiu was sending the little girl home. She originally planned to leave after sending her home, but who knew that the little girl would cry and beg her to go in. Helpless, she could only follow her into the courtyard. Listening to the little girl's incessant chatter along the way, she knew that this courtyard was still quite a distance away from the main courtyard. This was also the place where the old master of the Shu family usually lived, so it was relatively quiet. Where's my grandfather? The little girl looked around but didn't see her grandfather's figure, so she grabbed a servant girl and asked. Replying to 11th young miss, third elder just came to ask the old master to go to the front. He just left not long ago. As the servant girl spoke, she lowered her head, not daring to look at the beautiful woman in red. Then ask the small kitchen to make some delicious food for us and send it to the pavilion. She spoke with the appearance of a little adult, dutifully playing the role of a little host to entertain guests. Yes. The servant girl replied, then retreated. Fengjiu sat in the pavilion, one hand supporting her cheek as she watched. She felt that although this little girl was young, she was quite good at doing things. It was just that sometimes she would say some idioms wrongly. However, at her age, she was already considered good, because she had the innocence and kindness of a child, but also the aura of a noble family's daughter. The people in the small kitchen worked very quickly, and in about half an incense's time, the dishes were served one after another. The two of them, one adult and one child, ate in this quiet and secluded courtyard, very satisfied. Beautiful aunt, I like to eat this dish the most. It's so delicious. The little girl picked up a piece of meat and stuffed it into her mouth. She ate with a satisfied expression, and even recommended Fengjiu to eat. Fengjiu didn't stand on ceremony and tried a bit of each dish. Although these dishes were quite delicious, her mouth had long been spoiled by the previous cook. She felt that no matter how delicious these dishes were, they couldn't compare to the dishes made by the previous cook. Thus, after eating a bit, she put down her chopsticks. However, just as Fengjiu got up and walked around to help with digestion, she suddenly felt a wave of fluctuation in the air. Her brows raised slightly, and she released her divine sense to investigate. At this moment, in front of the main gate of the Shu clan, corpses were strewn all over the ground. Fresh blood flowed out, and the smell of blood permeated the air. As they fought, a powerful qi filled the air. The members of the Shu clan were covered in wounds of various sizes. Standing at the front of the Shu clan's gate were the Shu clan's patriarch and the Shu clan's patriarch. At this moment, the Shu clan's patriarch's hand that was holding the sword was bleeding. There was also a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth that had not been wiped away. Old Master Shu wasn't injured, but his face was pale, as if he was enduring something. In the next moment, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Father! Old Master! Grandfather! Cries of alarm rang out. Old Master Shu raised his hand, indicating that they didn't need to worry. After wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, he looked at the people in front of him and asked in a deep voice, what do you want before you'll stop? Stop. Ha 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 ha. Chapter 48-26. Hearing this, the faces of the Shu family members turned ugly. Especially at this time, an elder stepped forward and whispered into the ears of Patriarch Shu and Patriarch Shu. When the aristocratic families in the city heard that we were in trouble, they all said that their ancestors were either absent or in closed-door cultivation and were unwilling to help. Hearing this, the two of them felt their hearts sink. There were only 4 people on the other side, but they were all extremely strong cultivators. With the Shu family's strength, they might be able to fight 1 or 2 of them, but against 4, they had no chance of winning. At this moment, in the rear courtyard, after Feng Jiu's divine sense probed the situation in front, she turned to look at the little girl who was still lying on the table and eating meat. She couldn't help but shake her head and reveal a helpless smile. How did she end up encountering the Shu family's troubles the moment she stepped out of the door and into the Shu family's residence? She clasped her hands behind her back and walked around the courtyard. Looking at the fresh flowers planted in the courtyard, she reached out to pluck one and played with it. Xan, her. She called out to the little girl in the pavilion. Beautiful aunt, what's the matter? Hearing Fengjiu call her, she quickly put down her chopsticks and took a big gulp of the soup in her bowl. Only then did she jog over. Fengjiu glanced at her and smiled, I have a contracted beast. My child used to love riding it everywhere. Do you want to ride it? Can I? Hearing this, her eyes couldn't help but light up. 2 cute little dimples appeared on her round little face. She nodded vigorously, beautiful aunt, I want to ride it, I want to ride it. Fengjiu's lips curved slightly. He raised his hand and the cloud-swallowing beast appeared in front of her. When the cloud-swallowing beast came out, it glanced at its master and knew what she meant. It lowered its body so that the little girl could climb onto its back. Wow! What a big beast! The little girl wasn't afraid and excitedly climbed onto the beast's back with her short legs. It's called the cloud-swallowing beast. Fengjiu said with a smile. Cloud-swallowing beast. Does it eat clouds? She stroked Tun Yun's fur curiously. When she saw how docile and obedient it was, she could not help but feel emboldened. She clamped her legs together and swallowed Tun Yun's fur with both hands. She said to Fengjiu, beautiful auntie, I'll send it to Grandpa to take a look. Grandpa will definitely be shocked. He. Fengjiu smiled as he watched her smile happily and ride away on Tun Yun. He played with the flowers in his hand and strolled around the courtyard with light steps to aid digestion. Along the way, the maidservants and guards who saw the cloud-swallowing beast were startled. The maidservant shouted for the carriage to go forward. However, she was stopped before she reached the front yard. Xian, where did this beast come from? Why are you riding it? Come down quickly. When a man in his 30s saw the ferocious beast his niece was riding, his face turned pale. He wanted to go forward, but he didn't dare to. Second uncle, where's Grandpa? I rode it to show Grandpa. The little girl didn't understand his fear and continued to talk to him with a smile. Your grandpa and the others are in front of the gate. Something happened at home. Someone came to seek revenge and many people were killed or injured. You should go back quickly. It's not safe in front. The man wanted to go forward, but he saw the beast glance at him. He couldn't help but freeze in place, unable to move. Chapter 48-27. It wasn't here to let the little girl ride it for fun. Instead, its master had sent it to the front to solve the problem. It didn't have time to hang around here. Seeing the beast stride forward, the man broke out in a cold sweat. He raised his hand to wipe his sweat and muttered, where did this beast come from? Why is it so scary with just one look? Also, the aura on that beast, could I have seen wrongly? He was a little dizzy. After taking a deep breath, he hurriedly chased after it. The little girl rode Tun Yun to the front. Because she was sitting on Tun Yun's back, she could see the scene in front of her from a distance. Coincidentally, she saw that her grandfather was fighting with two people. One of them was about to launch a sneak attack from behind. The wind from his palm condensed a strong pressure. Seeing that it was about to land on her grandfather's back, she shouted in shock. "Grandfather!" Tun Yun leaped forward and flung the little girl sitting on its back. At the same time, it shouted, "Catch her!" When the man who rushed over heard Tun Yun's words and saw his little niece being flung over, he instinctively reached out to catch her. When he hugged his little niece in his arms, he let out a sigh of relief. "Thank goodness, thank goodness. You're not hurt, right?" "Wu, second master, someone hit grandfather." The little girl's eyes turned red and she started crying. Roar! Almost at that moment, the beast-swallowing cloud let out a roar. That roar carried the pressure of a sacred beast as well as a powerful aura. Almost at the same time, the three people who were fighting were startled and instinctively looked towards the direction where the roar came from. What they saw was an awe-inspiring sacred beast pouncing towards them. Its aura was ferocious, and it carried with it a shocking bloodthirsty killing intent. In just a split second, the arm of the person who was about to attack Old Master Shu was torn off by swallowing cloud. Hiss! Ah! The sound of a gasp was heard, followed by a blood-curdling scream. That scream instantly reached the clouds and reverberated in the sky. Those who heard it couldn't help but shiver. Old Master Shu didn't react. He only stared with wide eyes at the sacred beast that came out of nowhere and tore off the immortal monarch's arm. At the same time, he was sent flying in the direction of the main door. His son and the rest supported him. "Sacred, sacred beast." Their voices were filled with unconcealable astonishment and disbelief. Obviously, none of them had expected that a sacred beast would suddenly appear in the Shu clan. Furthermore, this sacred beast's battle prowess was so strong. Almost at that instant, other than the immortal monarch whose arm had been torn off, who couldn't dodge in time, the other three quickly retreated. However, the immortal monarch whose arm had been torn off wasn't so lucky. He couldn't dodge in time and was bitten by Tun Yun. Tun Yun then slammed him to the ground. Tun Yun stomped on his body, and the sound of bones breaking could be heard. Faintly, it was as if his inner core had shattered into pieces at this moment, producing a slight cracking sound. Save me! That person lay on the ground and looked in the direction of the other three people. As he spoke, blood flowed out of his mouth. Hiss! Chapter 48-28. Forget about the powerful cultivators, even the people from the Shu family were shocked by the sudden appearance of the sacred beast. The Shu family did not have a sacred beast, so where had this sacred beast come from? Tun Yun stepped on the man who had fallen to the ground. His bloodthirsty eyes stared at the three people who had been stunned in front of him. A low and vicious voice sounded from his mouth, "If you want to be impudent, you should know whose territory this is. Get lost." As soon as it finished speaking, it kicked the person on the ground in the direction of the three people. The three people instinctively stretched out their hands to catch the person who was spitting out blood. One of them helped the person to the two people next to him, then looked at Tun Yun, suppressing the fear in his heart, and asked, "Whose contracted beast are you? Who is your master?" Tun Yun did not answer his question. Instead, it let out a furious roar. It lowered its body and charged forward, pouncing towards them. Its sharp claws drew a few streaks of sharp air currents in the air. Its ferocious aura shocked them so much that they did not dare to stay any longer. They hurriedly fled. They escaped just like that. The crowd stared in shock at the few people who had escaped. For a moment, they could not help but stare blankly. It was only until a young and anxious voice rang out that everyone regained their senses. "Grandfather, grandfather, how are you? Are you hurt?" The little girl squeezed her way to the front from the back, tugging on his sleeve and looking at him worriedly with her round little face. "Grandfather is fine." Old Master Shu patted her little hand, and then looked towards the sacred beast. He cupped his hands and bowed, "Thank you for saving me, but, I don't know who your esteemed master is." Tun Yun walked over, glanced at the little girl, then walked into the Shu family residence. When the crowd saw this, they could not help but be stunned. "Grandfather, that is the beautiful ant's contracted beast." The little girl said, enunciating clearly, "I brought the beautiful ant back from the streets. I invited her to our house for a meal. She let me ride that beast for fun, so she came here." "Father, let's go in first," family head Shu said. Hearing this, the old man nodded and led his granddaughter inside. The people behind him quickly cleaned up the corpses in front of the door and walked inside. When they arrived inside, they were not in a hurry to go to the backyard. Instead, they first let Shu Xian explain what had happened. Only then did the old master and the patriarch bring Shu Xian along to express their gratitude. When they arrived at the courtyard, they searched everywhere, but the red-clothed woman that Shu Xian mentioned was nowhere to be found. "Where did he go?" "He was clearly here just a moment ago," the little girl said anxiously. "Greetings, Patriarch." A maidservant stepped forward and bowed. "The young lady from before has already left." Hearing this, they could not help being stunned. "Left?" He saved their Shu family and actually left just like that. What kind of person was he? Beautiful Auntie left. Why did Auntie Beauty leave? The little girl was anxious. She turned around to look at her grandfather and asked, "Grandpa, what should we do if beautiful Auntie leaves?" "Father, who do you think the person who saved us is?" Clan Master Shu asked. Chapter 48-29. Little Shu Xian looked at her grandfather in confusion. There were some things that she couldn't understand, didn't understand, and didn't know. But she only knew that the beautiful auntie she brought home for dinner today was very powerful. Her contracted beast saved her grandfather and saved the Shu family. At this moment, Fengjiu, who had left the Shu family, was strolling in a shop. She had only entered the Shu family by chance. For the sake of that little girl, she had conveniently resolved their family's crisis. Since she had eaten and the crisis had been resolved, there was no need for her to stay there and wait for them to thank her. "Shopkeeper, do you have any good kitchen knives here?" A girl's delicate voice was heard. Fengjiu, who was looking at things in front of the counter, couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and look over. She saw a 16 or 17-year-old girl walk in. She was wearing a neat green dress and had 2 braids. She wasn't stunningly beautiful, but her facial features were well defined and she was very youthful and pretty. "Hee, miss, how can we have kitchen knives here? The knives we sell here are all of the best quality. They are for self-defense, not for cutting vegetables," the shopkeeper said with a smile. "I don't want an ordinary kitchen knife. I want something of better quality, the kind that won't be chipped even if I cut the bones of a spirit cow." As the woman spoke, she walked forward and said, "Where are your knives? Let me see for myself." "All right, see if there are any suitable ones." "They're here." The shopkeeper smiled and brought her to the place where the knives were. When Fengjiu heard this, she found it interesting, so she also watched from the side. Seeing the young girl pick and choose and finally buy 2 small knives, she asked, "Shopkeeper, are there any weapon refiners in the city?" "Hee, miss, there are, but they only refine weapons and don't know how to refine kitchen knives." The shopkeeper smiled and said, "Miss, I'll wrap these 2 small knives for you." "No need." As the girl spoke, she took out a rectangular box and placed the 2 newly bought knives in 2 empty spaces. Fengjiu glanced at it and saw that there were all kinds of knives and cooking utensils inside. Seeing that she had everything, her eyes flashed and a smile appeared on her lips. "Miss, you like to cook?" The girl turned around as if she had just seen such a beauty. She blinked and stared at Fengjiu for a while before exclaiming, "So beautiful, which family's young miss are you? Why are you so beautiful? I didn't see you just now." Hearing that, Fengjiu smiled lightly. "Do you like to cook? How are your culinary skills?" "I like to cook. My culinary skills, in my family, but in my family's family, but outside, I haven't met anyone who can cook better than me," she said with a smile. Her face was full of confidence and pride. "Oh. Fengjiu, does not know how to cook, Tes Fengjiu's." Chapter 48-30. Fengjiu was slightly surprised. "There's such an aristocratic family? I've never heard of it." She had just ascended, and the information that Mo Chen had given her was only about powerful people. Indeed, she had never heard of such an aristocratic family before. At this time, the shopkeeper at the side couldn't help but come over and said, "I know Chef God Song. He is indeed a person who relies on cooking to improve his cultivation. His dishes are all made from rare spirit beasts. The meat of spirit beasts can strengthen the aura of spiritual energy in the body, but the dishes made by Chef God Song will be more than 10 times more effective. It is said that his most famous dish is the medicinal cuisine that he developed. It is a delicacy that can cure diseases and is difficult to buy even with money." As he spoke, the shopkeeper looked at the young lady in green and exclaimed, "I didn't expect you to be from the Song family. My apologies for not recognizing you. How is it? Amazing, right?" The young lady raised her chin, her face full of pride. Fengjiu thought for a while and said, "I didn't expect such a chef to exist. I'm really ignorant." She smiled and had an idea. She was looking for a chef. If there really was such a chef, she had to invite him to her immortal abode. "I didn't expect it. She's actually from Chef God Song's family." A man's voice sounded. A man in brocade robes walked in with his hands behind his back. Behind him were a few guards and a middle-aged man. At first, the man in brocade robes looked at the young lady, but he didn't expect to see a beauty in red. "This young lady is..." The man's eyes were filled with amazement, and he couldn't help but be distracted for a moment. Fengjiu didn't say anything. She only glanced at the man indifferently and looked away. "Elder sister, let me treat you to a meal. I just bought 2 knives, and I can try them out," the young lady in green said and looked at Fengjiu. Fengjiu, who had just been treated to a meal, couldn't help but smile when she heard that she was being treated again. However, she didn't refuse and replied, "Okay. Let's go," the young lady in green said and was about to walk forward. Don't be in such a hurry to leave." The man in embroidered clothes reached out to stop her and said, "I've heard that Master Chef Song's family has good culinary skills. It's rare to meet a lady here. Why don't you follow me home? TSK. Do you think I'm someone you can invite?" The girl in green sneered and raised her foot to kick the man in embroidered clothes. A good dog doesn't block the way. The moment she made her move, the man quickly dodged and retreated. His face darkened and he immediately ordered, "Capture her for this young master." "Elder sister, back off." The girl in green pushed Fengjiu aside and took out a frying pan from her space. She then smacked the 2 guards on the head. Fengjiu retreated and watched from the side. When he saw the young girl use a frying pan, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. When he saw that her attacks were inexplicably strange, he couldn't help but concentrate. After carefully observing for a while, a trace of astonishment appeared on his face. He didn't see wrongly. This young girl's attacks were clearly the movements of frying vegetables and cutting meat. Looking at her posture, it was as if she was going to deal with the 2 guards as if they were her dishes. Chapter 48-31. Their clothes were torn to shreds, and the two guards were left with only a pair of underwear with several holes. Their faces immediately turned red, and their hands instinctively covered the area between their legs. At the same time, they quickly retreated. Useless things. The brocade-robed man was furious, and said to the middle-aged man beside him, "Take her down." "Yes." The middle-aged man responded, and instantly attacked the girl in green. Fengjiu looked at the girl in green. Her skills were not bad. Although her style was strange, it was undeniable that her unique attack method was very lethal. However, the middle-aged man's cultivation was above hers, and he could probably handle a few moves. After a long battle, the winner would be decided. Therefore, she stood to the side and watched. When she saw that the girl in green was unable to dodge the middle-aged man's attack, she attacked with a silver needle and instantly pierced the middle-aged man's acupuncture point. At that moment, his movements slowed down, and he let out a muffled groan. He instinctively wanted to retreat, but the girl in green had already reacted, and slammed the frying pan with all her might. Bang! Pooh! The bottom of the frying pan directly hit the middle-aged man's face, and the force was so great that he was sent flying. Blood spurted out of his mouth, and the middle-aged man fell to the ground. In an instant, shock and fear flashed across his eyes, and he couldn't help but look at Fengjiu. "Damn it! You just wait!" The brocade-robed man shouted angrily. Seeing that the girl in green was so fierce, he didn't dare to fight, and instead prepared to escape. However, at this moment, Fengjiu reached out and flicked a silver needle, which pierced one of the man's acupuncture points. The man's legs went soft, and he fell forward, rolling and crawling out of the shop. "You dare to have ideas about this great ant, and you didn't even ask if my frying pan agreed." The girl in green snorted, and hurriedly checked the bottom of her frying pan. Seeing that it was still fine, she couldn't help but grin. "The quality of my brother's frying pan is good." Fengjiu couldn't help but chuckle when he heard this. He walked over and looked at her. "I didn't expect you to be so skilled. Of course, people in my family not only know how to cook, but we're also very good at fighting." She raised her chin and said to Fengjiu, "Elder sister, why didn't you bring someone to protect you? You have such an unsafe face, and you'll attract a lot of trouble outside. You're lucky you met me today, or you would have been caught by them. Let me tell you, there aren't many good young masters from aristocratic families. They all use their family's power, and do evil, especially when they see a beautiful woman." Fengjiu chuckled and said, "Isn't the Song family a noble family as well? Of your brother of the family of the aristocratic families of aristocratic families. How is it different?" Fengjiu asked, amused. "Anyway, it's different. They wouldn't do such a wicked thing." The girl in green said, and then said, "Elder sister, I said I would treat you to a meal. Come, let's go to a restaurant. I'll personally cook and treat you to a good meal." Fengjiu smiled and said, "Why don't you treat me tonight? I was just treated to a full meal, and if I eat now, I won't be able to eat anymore." Chapter 48-32. Hearing her say this, Fengjiu nodded and accompanied her to buy a knife. Along the way, she listened to her talk about her family. She roughly understood that there was such a family. However, after Fengjiu accompanied her around, she still couldn't find a suitable kitchen knife. In the evening, the two of them walked into a restaurant. Songmi borrowed the restaurant's kitchen and personally cooked a table of dishes for her. Looking at the table full of delicious dishes, Fengjiu raised her eyebrows and said, "They all look delicious. Big sister Feng, try it. I know how to make many other dishes, but I don't have the ingredients here, so I can only make do," Songmi said as she picked up some food for Fengjiu. She looked at her and waited for her evaluation. Seeing this, Fengjiu picked up her chopsticks and took a bite of the golden fried thing in the bowl. It was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. The meat was fresh and juicy, and the aftertaste was endless. Moreover, there was a wave of spiritual energy that flowed through her body as she swallowed the meat. She couldn't help but nod and say, "It's very fragrant. What meat is this? How can it be so delicious?" Hee, there just happened to be a freshly killed black spirit pig in the kitchen. I took the most tender and delicious piece of its meat to make this dish for Big Sister Fong. This piece of meat is also very good for stir-frying. It's a pity that there's only one piece in a spirit pig, so it's only enough to make one dish. Hearing this, Fengjiu gave her a thumbs up and said, "Your cooking skills are really good. I used to have a cook who was also very good at cooking, but compared to her, you're better by 3 points. You're really not simple." Being praised by Fengjiu, she smiled happily and picked up some food for her. "Big Sister Fong, try this. This is." Next, she picked up some food for Fengjiu while explaining how the dish was made. Fengjiu just nodded and didn't say a word. She only focused on eating the food in her bowl. It wasn't until more than half of the dishes on the table were in her stomach that she put down her chopsticks. She exhaled lightly and said with a satisfied expression, "I'm so full. I haven't eaten so full in a long time. Every dish is delicious. It's so delicious that I don't want to stop. My family's cooking is very good. My cooking skills are not even on the list in my family," she said with a smile. Seeing her eat with satisfaction, she was also happy to see her cook. "You were so busy picking up food for me that you didn't eat much," Fengjiu said. She stood up and walked for a while to help with digestion. "Big Sister Fong, haven't you heard of the saying, even 3 years of famine won't starve the stove to death?" She winked at her and said with a charming face, "People who cook are usually full before the dishes are served. Think about it, try this dish, try that dish. After cooking this table of dishes, how can you still be hungry?" Hearing this, Fengjiu couldn't help but chuckle. Her eyes were full of smiles as she looked at her and said, "Mir, you said you came out to experience the world alone. Why don't you follow me?" "Follow you?" Chapter 48-33. Fengjiu smiled, "I know, I won't be going home either. I still have other matters to attend to. Also, if you follow me while I'm away and cook for me, I can ask Master Tai to refine a kitchen knife for you, a big knife for cutting beast bones. What do you think?" Master Tai." She opened her eyes wide and asked in astonishment, "Is Sister Fong talking about the top refining master, Master Ironbone?" "Yes, that's him." Fengjiu nodded with a smile. She knew that in one of the territories of the 4 great emperors, there was such an expert in refining weapons. Because this person was tough and had a bad temper, very few people could ask for a weapon made by him. But it's not easy to get his weapon. Also, my father couldn't get a knife when he went to ask for one. How could he? It wasn't that she didn't want to believe it, but it was simply impossible. "You only need to say if you're interested or not?" Fengjiu asked. Song Mi looked at her and thought for a moment before nodding, "All right, I'll go with you." Fengjiu smiled, "Then let's go. It's time to get down to business." If they cut off the resources in her territory, she would go to the 4 great emperors' territories and stir up trouble. If they wanted to poach her territory, she would find a chance to destroy one of them. She would take over his territory. Currently, the clans and powerhouses in her territory were afraid of the 4 great emperors' prestige and didn't dare to submit to her. They felt that as a woman, even if she ascended to the position of Phoenix Lord, she was still just a woman. For experts, it was as difficult to make them submit to a woman as it was for them to ascend to the martial emperor realm. After all, women had always been at a disadvantage since ancient times. Unless she did something to make them submit to her from the bottom of their hearts, it was very difficult to make them submit to her. To her, things that could be resolved with force were much easier. She was more than willing to prove everything with her strength. Song Mi-er didn't know Fengjiu's background, only that she was called Fengjiu. She didn't think that she was related to the Phoenix Lord who ascended not long ago. After all, such a supreme figure was in existence she didn't even dare to think about. In her heart, such a powerhouse would appear and disappear mysteriously. Naturally, she wouldn't run into one so easily. The two paid the bill and headed out. Song Mi-er followed beside her. Seeing her walking towards the city gates, she couldn't help but ask, "Big sister, are we leaving the city?" Let's go somewhere else." Fengjiu replied and led her towards the city gates. However, as soon as they left the gates, a shout came from behind. "It's them! Catch them! Don't let them escape!" Fengjiu and Song Mi-er turned around and saw that it was the subordinates of the embroidered-robed man they dealt with in the shop. However, the leader this time was replaced by two middle-aged men. Behind them was the middle-aged man who'd been hit by Song Mi-er's frying pan. "They're here for revenge, let's go," Song Mi-er said and hurriedly pulled Fengjiu away. Chapter 48-34. If Du Fan and the others were here, they would have people they could use. Then, she wouldn't have to wait for them to come back and deal with this clan. The pursuers watched as the two left on their swords. They only gave them a hateful glare before leading their men back. The two of them fled very quickly. They couldn't catch up to them even if they wanted to. It was best to return and report to the clan head first. They might have let them escape this time, but the next time they come to this city, they won't let them escape. Half a month later. In a bustling city, Song Mi-er glanced at Fengjiu from time to time. Her eyes were filled with confusion. "What's wrong?" Fengjiu asked. She continued to walk forward slowly, her gaze fixed in front of her. Song Mi-er paused and said, "Elder sister, just who are you? The people we met yesterday were so powerful, but they left with their tails between their legs. I know that big sister must have done something to make them so frightened." Fengjiu chuckled. "I didn't do anything. I just used my aura to suppress them. They knew that they were no match for me. Naturally, they wouldn't dare to make an enemy out of us." As she spoke, she turned her head slightly and looked at her. "Don't worry. I won't take you to sell." Song Mi-er smiled in embarrassment. "I know. I was just curious." Her clan was a very large one. She had seen all kinds of people, but the more she interacted with her, the more she felt that she wasn't a simple person. However, she had never heard of the Feng clan. Fengjiu smiled and didn't say much. She entered an inn with her. In the room, she said, "Rest here today. I need to go out and do something. If I'm quick, I'll be back in a day. If I'm slow, I'll be back in 2 or 3 days." With that, she waved her sleeve and Tun Yun appeared from the space. However, it wasn't its original body. It was small and looked tame and harmless. "It's my contracted beast. When I'm not around, let it follow you. If you meet with danger that you can't deal with, it can at least protect you." Fengjiu glanced at Tun Yun on the ground and instructed her with her consciousness. Wow! What a cute little beast. After all, she was a young girl. Seeing such a cute little pet, her eyes couldn't help but light up. However, when she touched the little beast's round and meaty body, she couldn't help but smile. So much meat. The meat of this little beast should be very fresh and delicious. In an instant, several dishes flashed through her mind. She thought about how to make them taste better if they were made into dishes. Hearing her words, Tun Yun let out 2 puffs of air from its nose. It shook its head and shook off the hand that was touching it. "Poochie." Fengjiu could not help but chuckle. She shook her head helplessly and said, Don't try to make a dish out of little beasts whenever you see them." She glanced at Tun Yun and said, "It's called Tun Yun. It's no ordinary little beast. Cloud devouring. Mi-er's eyes lit up as she looked at the white ball that had walked to the side and jumped onto a chair. She smiled and said, "It's been a long time since I've made a yuntuan. Big sister, I'll go make some for you later. Eat it before you leave." Chapter 48-35. Knowing that Fengjiu had something to do, Song Mi-er didn't waste any time. She let Fengjiu rest in the room while she went downstairs to borrow the kitchen. She made 2 bowls of wontons and brought them up. After eating the wontons, Fengjiu said a few words and left alone, leaving Tun Yun to protect Song Mi-er. After all, along the way, she found that as long as people knew that Song Mi-er was from the Song clan, they would always have designs on her. Although Song Mi-er wasn't completely defenseless, she was still her kitchen maid. She naturally couldn't let anything happen to her when she wasn't around. This place was the territory of one of the 4 great emperors who had attacked her, and it was close to her territory. That was why she had chosen this place to annex it. She had been here for a few days. Sometimes, she would go out to inquire about some information. Therefore, she had a rough idea of the situation here. Today, she was going to go to the floating island in this world to see if the great emperor was on that island. She soared into the sky towards the clouds. As she was not sure which corner of this territory the floating island was in, she released her divine sense to search for the location of the floating island after ascending into the clouds. After about the time it took for an incense stick to burn, she opened her eyes. Light flashed through her eyes, and the corner of her lips curled into a half-smile. The floating island was hidden in the clouds with a boundary and a concealment formation. If it wasn't for her mental strength, she wouldn't have been able to sense the location of the floating island. But now, with a flick of her sleeve, her red sleeves fluttered in the wind. In the next moment, the dazzling red figure turned into a ray of light and shot towards the clouds. At this moment, the great emperor cultivating in seclusion on the floating island was still unaware that a great disaster was about to befall him. Due to the severity of his injuries, he took a pill to regulate his breathing and cultivate, hoping to recover as soon as possible. However, they knew very well how much of their strength they had used up in the attack. It was no doubt wishful thinking to recover in such a short time. But apart from that, they had no other choice. On one hand, they had to be wary of Fengjiu. They were afraid that she would come looking for them. In the cave residence at the back mountain of the immortal mansion, the great emperor exhaled softly, frowned, and opened his eyes. He felt a little uneasy today, as if something unsettling was about to happen. He couldn't even calm down to cultivate and adjust his breath. What's going on? Could it be that something is going to happen? After all, he was an existence of this level. He would always have a sense of danger. It was this perception that allowed him to avoid danger most of the time. Regarding this, he had always firmly believed in this premonition of his. Just like now, when an inexplicable sense of panic appeared in his heart, he stopped cultivating and regulated his breathing. He opened his eyes and got off the ice bed. With his hands behind his back, he paced back and forth in the cave with a thoughtful and worried expression. Chapter 48-36. In the end, he walked out of the cave and headed towards the immortal palace. Master. Seeing him come out, a middle-aged man came forward in surprise and hurriedly asked, "Master, did something happen?" The Northern Flame Martial Emperor looked at him with a sullen expression and asked, "This emperor wanted to ask you, is everything as per normal? Has the order to cut off Fengjiu's resources been completed?" "Rest assured, Master, everything has been arranged according to Master's orders," the middle-aged man respectfully said. Hearing this, his tightly knitted brows didn't loosen. Instead, he said, "Take some people to patrol around. I feel a bit uneasy today, so it's better to be careful." "Yes," the middle-aged man replied. The middle-aged man responded. However, just as his voice fell, there was a loud bang in the air. It was as if the barrier had been broken. As the loud sound spread, the air also fluctuated along with the airflow. Almost at the same time, the Northern Flame Martial Emperor's expression changed and became gloomy. Damn it. He cursed in a low voice and instinctively took a step back. His body was in a defensive posture as he vigilantly looked at the red figure that appeared in the sky after the barrier was broken. Fengjiu. He gritted his teeth as he called out that name. His eyes were filled with hatred. Even though he wanted to kill her 1,000 times, he knew that his injuries hadn't healed and he wasn't a match for Fengjiu. Hearing this, the middle-aged man's heart trembled and he looked at the red figure. He saw the red figure fly over with her hands behind her back. Her red clothes fluttered in the wind and her ink-black hair danced in the wind. Her peerless face was filled with coldness. He didn't have time to be shocked and he instinctively shouted, "Come. Face the enemy. Face the enemy." His voice contained spirit force and a trace of panic as it echoed in the air. As soon as his voice rang out, dozens of cultivators dressed in tight robes quickly appeared, brandishing their long swords as they attacked the red figure. Unfortunately, the difference in strength between them and Fengjiu wasn't just a little bit. With Fengjiu's current strength, only the Northern Flame Grand Emperor who was similarly at the Emperor realm could fight her. The others couldn't even withstand a single blow from her. Fengjiu glanced at those people and waved her hand. At the same time, she shouted, "Scram!" A powerful and terrifying pressure that was visible to the naked eye came out of her sleeve and hit the dozens of cultivators like a wave. The powerful pressure was accompanied by the pressure of an ancient divine beast and her own strength. As soon as it came out, the dozens of cultivators screamed and were sent flying. They fell to the ground messily and spat out blood. They couldn't stand up for a long time. Seeing this, the middle-aged man's expression changed and he couldn't help but look at the Northern Flame Martial Emperor. He immediately said, "Master, you haven't recovered from your injuries yet. If you fight her, you will definitely be at a disadvantage. Why don't we avoid this crisis for now and wait until Master recovers? It won't be too late to deal with her then." The Northern Flame Martial Emperor knew that with only 30% of his strength left, he wasn't a match for Fengjiu. Seeing her powerful aura, he clenched his teeth and hatefully said, "Let's go." He turned and wanted to escape. Chapter 48-37. Do you think you can still run away? Fengjiu snorted coldly. Her red figure stood in the air as she formed an ancient seal with her hands. As her hands moved, visible streams of spiritual energy rapidly interweaved into a net. Inescapable net, set. With a clear shout, she pushed her hand forward, and a ray of light flew out. In an instant, the net on the ground and the net in the sky quickly connected, blocking the Northern Flame Emperor's escape route. Powerful streams of air interweaved into a net, and it quickly formed a huge net that blocked the way forward, trapping the Northern Flame Emperor. Seeing this scene, the Northern Flame Emperor turned around and stared at the red figure with a cold and sharp gaze. "Fengjiu, you better think carefully. If you really become enemies with this emperor today, it's not certain who will live and who will die." A cold and threatening voice sounded, and the aura of an expert burst forth at this moment. Even if he only had 30% of his strength left, he was unwilling to show any weakness. What a joke! Fengjiu sneered, and her cold eyes fell on the Northern Flame Emperor. She said, "From the moment you became enemies with me and tried to kill me, you and I have been on opposing sides. Do you think it's possible to stop now?" She stretched out her hand, and the Qingfeng sword, which glowed with a cold green light, appeared in her hand. She pointed the long sword downwards, and sword force shot out. She also released a powerful pressure from her body. "You're a great emperor, after all. How are you different from a mouse if you run away with your tail between your legs?" Her eyes were filled with contempt and disdain, and the contempt in her eyes completely infuriated the Northern Flame Emperor. "Impudent!" A furious roar rang out. When the great emperor was enraged, the aura in the air seemed to tremble. The middle-aged man beside him could not withstand the powerful pressure. He only felt the blood and qi in his body churning. In the next moment, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body was on the verge of collapse as he knelt down. What an arrogant Fengjiu. Today, this emperor wants to see what you're capable of. The Northern Flame Emperor roared angrily. He couldn't calm the anger in his heart, and his breathing became rapid. Even if he only had 30% of his strength left, he was still a great emperor, and had always been a lofty existence. Since when did anyone dare to compare him with a lowly mouse that everyone despised? Fengjiu, a mere woman, dared to be so arrogant. Today, even if he had to use up all his cultivation, he had to teach her a lesson. He had to let her know how powerful he was. Then open your dog eyes wide and take a good look. Fengjiu snorted coldly. The next moment, the red figure turned into a flash of light and attacked him at the speed of light. The Qingfeng sword in his hand surged with a biting cold sword qi, revealing a terrifying murderous aura. You're courting death. Hearing her words, the Northern Flame Emperor felt a mouthful of blood rush up to his throat. He tasted blood in his mouth, but he forcefully swallowed it back down. Seeing Fengjiu's murderous aura rush over, he moved his hand, and a double-edged halberd appeared in his hand. As he swung it, there was a sharp whoosh. Clang! Chapter 48-38. Both of them released their powerful auras, forming a protective shield to protect their bodies from the other's sword aura and saber aura. The two of them were only about 3 steps away from each other due to the clash of sword and halberd. Because of this, he could clearly feel the powerful aura released by Fengjiu. If he wasn't injured, he might have been able to put up a fight. But now, after a long battle, he would definitely lose. Thinking of this, he didn't show it on his face, but he was secretly anxious. He quickly thought of a way to deal with this. Fengjiu wouldn't give him the chance and time. Her sword was blocked by his halberd and couldn't pierce through. Both weapons were extraordinary, and the aura emitted from them was extremely sharp. Looking at the sweat on the Northern Flame Emperor's forehead, her eyes flashed and her lips curled into a faint smile. I didn't expect the great Northern Flame Emperor to be so weak. As soon as her mocking voice fell, the hand holding the green-edged sword instantly turned, and the long sword slid past the opponent's halberd. Then, with a sudden turn, the tip of the sword avoided the opponent's halberd, and with a speed that was too fast for the ears to cover, it pierced towards his throat. The Northern Flame Emperor was startled by the cold killing intent, and he quickly raised his halberd to block it. However, in the next instant, the sword that had been aimed at his throat, which he had blocked, suddenly changed direction and pierced into his shoulder. Hiss! Ah! The sharp blade pierced his shoulder, but it brought with it a searing pain that was as hot as a flame. The pain penetrated his mouth and seeped into his bones and blood. His hand that was holding the halberd couldn't help but tremble for a moment. When he couldn't react in time, he gave Feng Nine a chance to strike again. Whoosh! She pulled out her sword from her shoulder and slashed at his arm. Her speed was so fast that it was hard for anyone to react to it. When she pulled out her sword, a column of blood gushed out from the Northern Flame Emperor's shoulder. When the sword slashed down, a piece of flesh flew out along with it. In an instant, a scream of agony rang out. Ah! That scream echoed in the air. What came into view was the Northern Flame Great Emperor's pale and panicked face, his body covered in blood, and his trembling arm hanging by his side. At that moment, he only felt darkness in front of his eyes, and his mind went blank for a moment. The fierce murderous aura that hit him in the face made him quickly retreat without thinking. His figure jumped out of the sky more than 10 meters away, and only then did he gasp for breath. Large beads of sweat dripped from his forehead. He was like a fish that had been washed ashore by the waves and was on the verge of death. His mouth was wide open as he gasped for air. His heart was beating fast. Fear, terror, and shock occupied his entire heart. Feng Jiu looked at him and curled her lips. She spoke in a clear voice that was neither fast nor slow. If it was an ordinary person, that move just now would have killed them on the spot. However, just as you said, you are a great emperor. If you can't even dodge that move, then wouldn't you be living up to your reputation? It's just that you won't be so lucky next time. At this moment, her voice sounded like the voice of the king of hell in his ears. He hadn't recovered from his injuries yet. Even 30% of his strength couldn't support him in a long battle. Perhaps it was because he had fought with her before, but at this moment, the only thought in his mind was to run for his life. Chapter 48-39. Trying to escape. Feng Jiu sneered. Looking at his expression, she knew that he was looking for a chance to escape. She sneered and glanced at the inescapable net that she had set up. I have modified this inescapable net. Even if there is a treasure that can escape, it will not be able to escape from this inescapable net. Today, you will not be able to escape from me. Hearing her words, the Northern Flame Emperor's heart sank. He had wanted to find a way to escape from this inescapable net. He did not expect her to discover his intentions. However, he did not believe that he would not be able to escape from this place. Red Tiger! Come out! He shouted. As soon as his voice fell, a flame flashed, and a majestic flying tiger with a pair of wings soared into the sky. The tiger roared, and the aura in the air shook for a moment. Roar! As the tiger roared, a strong air current spread. It flashed its claws and glared at Feng Jiu. It flapped its wings and stared warily at Feng Jiu. There was no other reason than the fact that it could feel the powerful aura of an ancient divine beast from this human woman's body. Even though it was a sacred beast, it was still no match for the might of an ancient sacred beast. Now that it had come out from the space, it did not dare to go forward. On the contrary, it took a step back in fear and let out a low howl. This human, it was afraid of her. Seeing his contracted beast take a step back after coming out, the Northern Flame Emperor felt very aggrieved. But he also knew that Feng Jiu's contracted beast was the ancient mythical beast Fire Phoenix. His mythical beast was no match for it. Therefore, he didn't plan to let his contract beast come out to deal with Feng 9. Instead, he wanted it to find the weakest point of this inescapable net and break through it while he was barely holding on. That way, it would have a chance to escape. Go! Find the weakest point of the heavenly network's escape route. He roared and ordered his contracted beast to find a way to break the inescapable net. Even if it did not work, it should be able to weaken Feng Jiu's inescapable net. At that time, even if he had to use up all his strength, he would definitely break through this damned inescapable net. Feng Jiu glanced at the sacred beast, then looked at the Northern Flame Emperor. She didn't give him a chance to catch his breath, and attacked with her Qin Feng sword again. This time, a flame appeared on the blade of her Qin Feng sword. It was like a fire dragon was coiling around the Qin Feng sword. The two figures fought back and forth. Most of the time, it was Feng Jiu who attacked while the other party dodged. Because the Northern Flame Great Emperor couldn't keep up with Feng Jiu's speed, more and more wounds appeared on his body. His robe had long been dyed red with blood. Feng Jiu didn't kill him directly with her sword either. Instead, she cut open his body with every strike, as if she wanted him to experience pain and die. Ah! He screamed as Feng Jiu stabbed his thigh. He fell from the sky and landed heavily on the ground. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Feng Jiu! If you want to kill me, just do it. Why do you have to cut me up? The Northern Flame Emperor stared at her furiously. There were countless wounds on his body. Every wound was pierced by the cold sword aura and burned by the fire. It was as if the fire was burning his bones and blood. He was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. Feng Jiu slowly descended from the sky. She pointed her sword to the ground and looked at the Northern Flame Emperor. Her beautiful face revealed a cold and bloodthirsty smile. Chapter 48-40. The Northern Flame Emperor opened his mouth, but he could not say a word. When he had decided to take action against them, he had already expected this day to come. However, he did not expect this day to come so quickly. Furthermore, under such circumstances, he, a great emperor, had to suffer so much pain and torment. Regret? No. He only hated that he did not kill her when she was ascending. Instead, he gave her the chance to become an immortal and become his enemy. The winner takes all. There's no point in talking anymore. If you want to kill me, you can do whatever you want. I will not beg for mercy. He said hatefully as he stared at her. Even though he was covered in wounds, he still straightened his back. As a great emperor, his dignity did not allow him to admit defeat in front of her. Is that so? Then let's try. She turned the sword in her hand and a sharp sword aura shot out, chopping off his 4 limbs. Hiss! A shrill scream rang out, reaching the clouds and echoing in the sky. That sound caused the sacred beast to roar at Fengjiu and pounce towards Fengjiu. Humph! Fengjiu snorted coldly. With a wave of his sleeve, a force shot out and sent the sacred beast flying. Bang! The sacred beast was sent flying dozens of meters away before landing heavily on the ground. Blood flowed out of his mouth. He wanted to stand up, but his 4 limbs were too weak to stand up. He lay down again, panting heavily. Ah! Fengjiu! Fengjiu! Even if I die, I will drag you down with me. His voice was filled with hatred. Intense pain and hatred filled the Northern Flame Emperor's chest. His 4 limbs were sent flying, and blood flowed out like a fountain. The spiritual energy in his body rose rapidly, and his hair flew in a mess. He looked like a crazy demon, and his eyes were filled with blood as he cursed angrily. In the next moment, his body swelled up like a balloon. Even his face was swollen. A strong air current accompanied by an aura of death exploded at that moment. The air current was so strong that it rushed towards Fengjiu. Fengjiu was standing a few meters in front of him. He wanted to use his own strength to take her down with him. His speed was so fast that no one could avoid it. When the powerful aura exploded, Fengjiu immediately turned around and entered the space in an instant, avoiding the deathly aura that covered the sky. Faintly, she only heard a loud bang, followed by a rumbling sound. She couldn't hear anything else because she hid in the space. Almost at the same time that the Northern Flame Emperor self-detonated, the spiritual pressure in the air disappeared with his death. At that moment, the ground where his territory was located shook violently. Rocks rolled down, the river surged, and the waves rolled up. At that moment, almost all the sovereigns and immortals in this territory felt that something had happened. Fengjiu came out of the space after a while. When she saw that the entire island was destroyed by the Northern Flame Emperor's self-detonation, she could not help but raise her eyebrows. A trace of surprise flashed through her eyes. I didn't expect the power to be so strong. Fortunately, I hid in the space. Otherwise, I'm afraid that I wouldn't have been able to avoid this attack. Chapter 48-41. The dust in the surroundings gradually dispersed, and at this time, a golden light reflected in her eyes. She walked forward to take a look, and could not help but raise her eyebrows. Emperor Immortal Seal. The Emperor Immortal Seal was the immortal seal of a great emperor. It wasn't created by the Emperor Immortal Seal, but was formed by the heavenly Tao when he ascended. She also had an Emperor Immortal Seal, but it was based on the Green Lotus Immortal Seal. I didn't expect this thing to be so sturdy. Everything else was destroyed, but this Emperor Immortal Seal is still intact. She softly murmured. She picked it up and saw the words Crimson Flame Great Emperor on it turn into golden light and disappear. She curled her lips into a smile. Holding the imperial immortal seal in one hand, she sent a strand of her soul into the immortal seal with the other. In an instant, the imperial immortal seal in her hand shot out a beam of green light. In the next moment, it flew up into the air from her hand. A ray of green light shot out from the imprint like the sun. It turned into tens of thousands of strands and spread out in the sky. At the same time that the mental energy from before dissipated, it quickly interweaved into a mental energy net that spread throughout the world. The immortal monarchs and immortal elders who sensed something was wrong and hurried to the immortal island of the Northern Flame Emperor were stunned on their way there. They stared blankly at the wisps of cyan light in the sky. That is. One of the immortal elders widened his eyes in shock as he looked at the cyan light that was visible to the naked eye. New mental energy. How is this possible? Another immortal elder exclaimed. He watched in disbelief as the powerful spiritual net quickly intertwined and replaced the previous spiritual force. On the other side, the immortal elders who were also rushing to the Northern Flame Great Emperor's island stopped in the air and looked at the sky in shock. What the hell is going on? How could this be? An immortal lord asked in disbelief. Another immortal elder's face paled. Could it be that the Northern Flame Great Emperor died? Hearing this, another immortal elder sucked in a cold breath. He immediately retorted, how is this possible? That was the Northern Flame Emperor. He had a lifespan that was as long as the heavens and earth, so how could he possibly die? This is simply impossible. The face of the celestial old man who had spoken earlier was pale and his body trembled. No one knew what he was thinking, but he muttered, even though he has the same lifespan as the world and has endless lifespan, what if he didn't die because of his lifespan but was killed instead? As soon as he finished speaking, the group fell silent. In an instant, even the sound of breathing could be heard. They couldn't imagine, nor did they dare to imagine, that the powerful Northern Flame Great Emperor would be killed by someone. If he was truly killed by someone, how powerful would the person who killed him be? Originally, they were all rushing towards the immortal island, but now, they were hesitating and panicking. If they went there now, they would probably run into the person who had killed the Northern Flame Great Emperor. At this moment, even if they didn't want to admit it, they had to. Only the death of the Northern Flame Great Emperor would disperse the spiritual energy in this world. Chapter 48-42. Who do you think it is? An immortal elder asked bitterly. An immortal master beside him shook his head. I don't know. The Northern Flame Great Emperor is so powerful. How could he be killed? Who has the ability to kill him? Killing a great emperor. This is not a joke. Who dares to do it? An immortal elder stroked his beard and pondered. I went to the Phoenix Master's territory a few days ago. The spiritual power there is similar to ours. Hiss. How is that possible? The Phoenix Master just ascended not long ago. She is a woman. How could she kill the Northern Flame Great Emperor? I don't believe it. The Immortal Master beside him said. He didn't believe that the Phoenix Master who just ascended not long ago did it. It's useless to say more. No matter who the new Great Emperor is, we should go and visit him. What do you think? An immortal elder said and looked at the others. They nodded and said, yes, no matter who this person is, he will be the emperor of our territory in the future. No matter what, we have to pay him a visit. Moreover, not only have we sensed it, I believe the other immortal monarchs and immortal elders have sensed it as well. They will definitely pay him a visit. They looked at each other and said, if we don't go now, when are we going? Let's go. With that, they turned into a few streaks of light and flew up into the sky. At this moment, Fengjiu looked at the square immortal seal. She rearranged her spiritual power and it slowly fell back into her hand. She played with it for a while and put it into her space. Then, she looked at the immortal island. Everything on the immortal island had been destroyed. Even the mountains could be said to be flattened. With her current strength, it wasn't difficult for her to use an immortal technique to restore it. However, she was thinking about what to do with the immortal island. She had a large immortal island of her own. There was almost nothing on it. She naturally couldn't abandon her own immortal island and come here to live. It's too wasteful to leave it here. After all, this is a gift from the heavenly Tao. It's surrounded by immortal qi. It's not comparable to an ordinary place. She murmured softly. After thinking for a bit, she finally decided to move this immortal island to her immortal island and merge them together to expand her territory. Alright, let's do that. A look of satisfaction flashed across her eyes. Just as she was about to cast an immortal spell to restore this place, she sensed someone approaching. She closed her eyes and released her divine perception to scan the area. She saw that it wasn't just one or two people who had come. Instead, it was the immortal lords and immortal elders of this territory, as well as some experts from other places. Her eyes flashed slightly, and her red figure turned and soared into the air, standing with her hands behind her back. As soon as those immortal monarchs and immortal elders arrived outside the island, they noticed the red figure that stood in midair from afar. Practically all of them were stunned when they saw her, and their faces were covered in astonishment and shock. They couldn't even conceal it. When they came, they had already guessed who this person was. Even if someone said that it was the Phoenix Master who had just ascended not long ago, they did not really believe it in their hearts. However, at this moment, when they saw the red figure standing in the air and looking down at them from above, their hearts suddenly trembled. Shock and disbelief filled their hearts and minds. Chapter 48-43. Even though none of the immortal monarchs and immortal elders had seen the newly ascended Phoenix Master, they had heard that she was a woman, a peerlessly beautiful woman. Moreover, she liked to wear red. Anyone who saw her once would never forget her face for the rest of their lives. At this moment, even though they had never seen the Phoenix Master before, they knew that this person was undoubtedly the Phoenix Master when they saw the beautiful woman in red standing in the air. "Why are all of you here?" Fengjiu's voice was cold and powerful. It echoed in the air and clearly entered everyone's ears. It was also her cold voice that pulled them back from their shock and absent-mindedness. They quickly lowered their heads, not daring to look at her face. One of the immortal elders lifted his robe and knelt down in front of her. "We are here to pay our respects to the Phoenix Master. From today onwards, we will be the Phoenix Master's subjects. We will serve the Phoenix Master for the rest of our lives and listen to your orders." Once the immortal elder's voice was heard, everyone came back to their senses. Those who were still a little hesitant immediately knelt down and paid their respects when they saw the immortal elder kneeling down. "We are here to pay our respects to the Phoenix Master. From today onwards, we will be the Phoenix Master's subjects. We will serve the Phoenix Master for the rest of our lives and listen to your orders." No matter what they were thinking or how shocked they were, at this moment, the Northern Flame Emperor had fallen. The Phoenix Master was in charge of their world and was their leader. They had no choice but to submit to her. Even though she was just a woman, in front of her strength and status, they had to kneel down in front of her respectfully. They were not allowed to be impudent or disrespectful. Everyone's voices were filled with spiritual energy. They gathered together and resounded in the air forcefully. Fengjiu, who was standing in the air, looked down at the people who were kneeling down in front of her. Countless powerful people were kneeling down in front of her, treating her as their leader. At this moment, she was still as calm as usual. She was not excited or happy at all. It was as if all of this was a matter of course. All of this was something that they had already gotten used to. Everyone knelt with their heads lowered and pressed against their palms. There was no sound from above telling them to get up. At this moment, they didn't dare to raise their heads or stand up. They didn't even dare to show the slightest bit of dissatisfaction. This was because they knew that the disparity in strength was too great. If the Phoenix Master wanted to kill them, even if they were celestial dukes with extraordinary statuses, she would still be able to take their lives with a flick of her finger. Another thing was that these people had just acted on the orders of the Northern Flame Emperor a few days ago to cut off the resources of the Phoenix Master's territory. If she were to blame them, they would probably, thinking of this, cold sweat seeped out from the foreheads of those kneeling on the ground, dripping onto the sailors. They only felt a chill run through their bodies, their hearts beating up and down in fear. Feng Jiu wanted to dampen their spirits, so she allowed them to continue kneeling and maintaining that posture. After a long while, she finally opened her mouth to speak. "I won't pursue your past, but from this moment on, if anyone dares to go against me, they will end up like the Northern Flame Emperor, who died without a corpse." Chapter 48-44. The Northern Flame Martial Emperor was indeed dead. He had indeed died at the hands of the Phoenix Master. Even though they had guessed it, they could not help but feel shocked when they heard the words coming out of her mouth. "Yes, we won't dare to be disloyal," everyone hurriedly replied. "Rise," Feng Jiu said. Her gaze landed on the immortal old man who had knelt down earlier. She asked, "Sort out everyone's information and send it to my deity island when the time comes. This old man is immortal old man Qinghua. I will obey the Phoenix Master's orders." The old man was pleasantly surprised. He hurriedly cupped his fists together and reported his name. "You can all leave now," Feng Jiu said as she glanced at everyone. Everyone responded and saluted before dispersing. Feng Jiu watched them leave, and she only looked at the ruins of the island after they vanished from her field of vision. In the next moment, she condensed her immortal energy and flicked her sleeve, causing numerous exquisite and gorgeous immortal abodes to appear once more below her. The Azure Emperor had sensed the death of the Northern Flame Martial Emperor on Cloud Sky Mountain. He walked out of his residence and looked at the sky in the distance with his hands behind his back. A hint of surprise flashed across his eyes. "I didn't expect Feng Jiu to kill the Northern Flame Martial Emperor. It seems like they were seriously injured by the attack back then. If it was not for Feng Jiu's attack when she ascended, even if Feng Jiu was at her peak, she would not have been able to kill the Northern Flame Martial Emperor so easily. However, she was able to kill the Northern Flame Martial Emperor now. It could only mean that the attack back then had seriously injured the four Martial Emperors. Once the news of the Northern Flame Martial Emperor's death spread, the other three should be afraid," he said softly and shook his head with a chuckle. They were already Martial Emperors. Why couldn't they have offended anyone? Why did they have to offend Feng Jiu? What else could it be if they were not tired of living? At the same time, when Mo Chen sensed the disturbance in the immortal abode, he walked out to take a look. He shook his head and smiled helplessly. "I thought you said you wouldn't touch those people for now. Who would have thought that only a few days have passed? You've already killed one." He was well aware of Feng Jiu's strength. Coupled with her vengeful nature, it was only a matter of time before the four great emperors died and became enemies with Feng Jiu. Now that one of them had died, not only would the other three be fearful, but everyone would also be alarmed, especially those great emperors who were in seclusion. No matter how much they did not care about worldly affairs, they would probably hear of Feng Jiu's name after this incident. Mo Chen's guess was right. Not only did the three great emperors who were recuperating in seclusion find out about the death of the Northern Flame Great Emperor, even the other great emperors in seclusion were alarmed by the death and replacement of the great emperor. All of them sent out people to inquire about Feng Jiu. In comparison, Feng Jiu was busy rearranging the celestial island she had just conquered. Once she was done, she would bring the floating celestial island back to her celestial island and merge the two celestial islands into one. Songmi, who had waited at the inn for 3 days, saw that Feng Jiu still hadn't returned. She couldn't help but glance at the little beast sleeping on the chair out of boredom. Because she'd said something wrong the other day, the little beast didn't pay much attention to her. Even when she tried to pet it, it brushed her hand away. Chapter 48-45. She stood up and looked at it with a smile. It's been a few days since I've moved around. Let's go out and buy groceries. I'll make you a good meal when we get back. How about that? Tunyon glanced at her. It couldn't deny that this person was good at cooking. It had just tasted her cooking 2 days ago and it was really good. So he straightened up, jumped down, and followed her. I didn't expect that. You're also a glutton. No wonder you're so fat. She smiled and couldn't help but want to touch Tunyon's soft body. Tunyon glanced at her with disdain and moved away. Song-mi didn't care. She opened the door and let it out, heading straight for the market. Other girls like to shop in jewelry stores, like looking at beautiful clothes and small trinkets. However, she liked to shop in the market and buy all kinds of kitchen knives. Fresh spirit mushrooms, fresh spirit mushrooms. Madam, look at these spirit mushrooms. They're all picked not long ago and they're still very fresh. A man was hawking in the alley, shouting to the passers-by. One person and one beast walked in the market. Song-mi looked around. When she heard someone shouting for spirit mushrooms, she casually glanced over and saw some matsutake on a piece of cloth on the ground in the alley. Her eyes couldn't help but light up. These are freshly picked. She squatted down and picked one up to take a look. She sniffed it and revealed a happy smile. It even has the smell of soil. When the man saw that someone had come to ask about it, he quickly smiled and said, "Miss, buy some spirit mushrooms to make soup and cook. These are all very fresh. They're freshly picked not long ago and they're very fresh. And the price isn't expensive." "How much is this?" Song-mi asked. 10 gold coins per caddy. If you buy more, I'll give you a discount. How about it? The man looked at her and asked. When she heard the price, Song-mi couldn't help but widen her eyes. She looked at him in astonishment. 10 gold coins per caddy. Seeing her expression, the man thought that she thought it was too expensive, so he hurriedly said, "Miss, the taste of this spirit mushroom is very fresh. It's different from ordinary spirit mushrooms, and it's very difficult to find. How about this? If you think it's expensive, I'll charge you 8 gold coins per caddy. Buy a caddy and try it. If you think it's delicious, then come back and buy it from me." "Good, straightforward. Pack them all up, I want them all." Her eyes lit up as she waved her hand and stared at the spirit mushrooms in the man's mouth. This was actually an extremely precious spirit pine mushroom. She had once eaten the dishes her father made with this spirit pine mushroom at home. She still remembered it to this day. However, this thing was very difficult to find and very few people knew about it. Even if they encountered it, they would only treat it as an ordinary mushroom. Hearing this, the man was delighted and hurriedly said, "Good, good, good. I just happen to have 10.5 jeans left. Take it as 10 jeans and I'll give it all to you." Song-mi straightforwardly took out the money and directly gave him 200 gold coins. She asked, "Big brother, keep this money well. By the way, I want to ask, where did you pick these spirit mushrooms?" When the man saw that she gave so much, he paused for a moment before saying, "I picked them in Hualin Mountain. There's a mix of Huashan pine and oak trees there." "Thank you, big brother." Song-mi smiled and thanked him. Just as she was about to take the spirit mushrooms, she heard a voice. Chapter 48-46. At the same time, a pair of big hands suddenly came forward and snatched the bag of things that had been wrapped up. Seeing that the thing she bought was snatched away, Song-mi immediately rushed forward to snatch it back. However, the middle-aged man holding the bag quickly retreated. At the same time, he opened the bag and revealed a pleasantly surprised smile. "It really is this thing." He took out a money bag and threw it to the man. "I'll buy this thing." The man was stunned. He looked at the money bag in front of him, then looked at Song Mir, then said apologetically to the middle-aged man, "Sir, the spirit mushroom has been sold to this lady." "Is that so? Then this money is mine." The middle-aged man looked at Song Mir and turned to leave with the bag. "Give it back to me." Song Mir was furious. She took out a kitchen knife from somewhere and slashed forward. A sharp wind came from behind. The middle-aged man was shocked and instinctively dodged. He saw the kitchen knife fly past him and stabbed into the ground in front of him. "Give it back to me. Otherwise, don't even think about leaving." Song Mir shouted and went forward to grab the bag in the middle-aged man's hand. "You dare to snatch something from me? You're courting death." The middle-aged man snorted and retreated. At the same time, two men in black clothes came out from the shadows and blocked Song Mir's attack. "You actually have helpers." Song Mir gritted her teeth and took out her weapon. "Am I seeing things? That girl took out a frying pan for cooking. That frying pan can be used as a weapon." Seeing the fight, the onlookers not far away couldn't help but widen their eyes in shock. They stared at the frying pan that was similar to the one on their stove. "Why is that lady snatching something from Fragrant Taste House's Chef Wei? Chef Wei is from the Wei family. Who here doesn't know him? Not giving him some face? It's just some spirit mushrooms. It's not like it's a big deal. Is it worth offending Chef Wei? Don't run. Give it back to me." Song Mir shouted. Seeing the middle-aged man take her spirit mushroom and turn to leave, she couldn't help but panic. Tun Yun, who was ignored because he was a small pet, glanced at Song Mir. Seeing that she wasn't at a disadvantage, he passed by and followed the middle-aged man. At this time, the middle-aged man was walking back. He was happy because he got something good. He didn't know that a small pet, no, a miniature sacred beast was following behind him. Tun Yun wasn't in a hurry to make a move. He followed him and watched as he turned left and right into an alley. Then, he suddenly pounced from behind and kicked with his two hind legs. "Ah!" The middle-aged man cried out in alarm. His entire body was sent flying by a huge force. At the same time, the bag in his hand was instantly snatched away. His entire body flew forward and crashed into the wall of the alley. His head was broken and bleeding. When he wiped off the blood on his forehead and looked back while gasping for breath, not to mention a person, there was not even a shadow of a ghost in the alley. Even the bag of spiritual Matsutake had disappeared. Who was it? He gritted his teeth and roared angrily. Using the wall as support, he stood up and chased after them. He looked around but didn't know where to start. Chapter 48-47. Look at that little pet. Not only is it adorable, it's even holding a big bag in its mouth, a man said as he looked at the meaty little pet curiously. What an adorable little pet. Where did you buy it from? I really want to raise one. A young girl found it adorable and couldn't help but keep her eyes glued to the adorable little pet. Looking at the way its butt swayed as it walked, her eyes couldn't help but sparkle. She tugged at the young man beside her and said, big brother, I want a pet like that too. It's so adorable. I don't know what breed that little pet is. It's very rare. It's probably the cub of some spiritual beast. The young man said thoughtfully. He also stared at the little beast swaying its butt as it jogged. He felt that such a little beast was very rare. Big brother, let's go see who this little pet is. The young girl said as she pulled her brother and ran forward. At this moment, the middle-aged man behind them had already caught up. Because when he asked around, someone said that they saw a cute little beast holding a bag in its mouth running in their direction. Naturally, he came looking for it. On the other side, Song Mir twirled the frying pan in her hand. The frying pan in her hand instantly expanded several times and she slammed it towards the two men in black. Scram! With a furious roar, she swung the frying pan with both hands, sending the two people flying with the bottom of the frying pan. Ah! Two blood-curdling screams rang out as the two men in black were sent flying dozens of meters away. They landed heavily on the street. When the surrounding people saw this scene, they all stared with their eyes wide open. They looked at the angry and pretty little girl. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, they wouldn't dare to believe that the two big men were actually slapped dozens of meters away by the bottom of her pot. Furthermore, that ordinary-looking frying pan could actually change in size. It looked like it was a treasure. Not far away, Tun Yun, who was returning with the bag in his mouth, happened to see Song Mir send the two men flying dozens of meters away with a single slap of the frying pan. The corner of his mouth twitched involuntarily. Master probably wouldn't have thought that such a pretty little girl would have the strength of an ox. Ah! Tun Yun! You helped me get it back. Song Mir, who was still fuming a moment ago, saw the little snow-white pet standing not far away with the bag of spirit pine mushrooms in its mouth. Her eyes immediately lit up and a surprised smile appeared on her face. She hurriedly ran over with the frying pan and took the bag from its mouth. Opening it, it was indeed the thing she bought earlier. She immediately put it into her space to prevent it from being stolen again. You've done a great job today. I'll give you an extra drumstick when we get back. Song Mir, the middle-aged man who appeared before her and hurriedly said, Tun Yun. That old bastard is here again. Before Tun Yun could react, she had already picked him up and started running. He could not help but roll his eyes like a human. Stop right there. Human. Chapter 48. This city was where the aristocratic families resided. News of what had happened here quickly reached the ears of some of the families. In particular, the Wei clan had sent men to capture Song Er. After all, this was the Wei clan's territory. If they were bullied by outsiders, how could they maintain their foothold in this city? On the other side, those men had gone to capture Song Mi. At the city gates, Fengjiu, dressed in red, strode in. She hadn't expected the matter to be resolved so smoothly. After all, she'd only gone to the Northern Flame Emperor to try her luck. Even if he wasn't there, she'd still wanted to destroy his lair. She hadn't expected that the Northern Flame Emperor hadn't gone somewhere else to recuperate. Instead, he'd stayed on the Immortal Island. After dealing with a formidable opponent, she felt inexplicably relaxed and happy. As for the remaining three, there was no rush. She would take it one step at a time. It was only a matter of time before she dealt with them. Fengjiu walked down the street and arrived at the inn. Just as she was about to enter, the innkeeper of the inn came out to greet her anxiously. "Aya, young miss, you're finally back." Fengjiu raised an eyebrow. "What's wrong? Did something happen? The young lady who came with you is in big trouble. I heard from the guests in the inn that the young lady somehow offended the Wei clan. She's now being surrounded by the Wei clan at the western main street. I heard that the Wei clan's people threatened to break that young lady's legs and even said that they would stew that little pet to eat." Hearing this, Fengjiu's lips curled into a smile. "I see. Thank you for telling me." She nodded at him. "Which way is the closest to the western main street?" "Go straight down this street, then turn left. Go straight for another 200 meters and then turn right." The innkeeper said, then looked at her with some hesitation. "Young miss, you're not thinking of going alone, are you? If you go alone, remember not to clash with the Wei clan again." "I know. Innkeeper, tell the waiter to prepare some water for me to take a bath. We'll be back in a while." Fengjiu chuckled and walked towards the street the shopkeeper had pointed out. When the shopkeeper saw this, he paused for a moment before shouting, "Waiter, quickly boil some water and bring it to the innermost guest room on the second floor." Judging from the aura of this red-clothed woman, she should have an extraordinary background. Perhaps nothing bad would happen to her. On West Street, Song Mi-er hugged Tun Yun and looked at the people surrounding her. She frowned and said, "How dare you? What are you trying to do in broad daylight?" "Humph. Stupid girl. I think you won't shed tears until you see the coffin." The middle-aged man snorted coldly and stared at Song Mi-er, waving his hand, "Capture her. Come and try it." Song Mi-er glared. She waved her hand and the frying pan appeared in her hand again. When the middle-aged man saw the frying pan in her hand, he recalled the scene from before, and his eyes burned with passion. "Capture her. Capture her for me." The frying pan that could change its size should be an immortal artifact. It could be used to cook food and also as a weapon for self-defense. Such a treasure was very suitable for a chef like him. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.